Good evening, Internet, and welcome to this week's Slice of Midweek Geek. I am the Old Geek, and I am joined tonight by Mage's Musings and Saxius. I do believe others will be joining us in a little bit, but you're stuck with the three of us for now. So say hello to the waiting folks, fellas.
Hello! Oscar, aren't you going to say hello to the fine people?
I could, but then they'll find me. I'll need them to go exploring the dungeon to get me. Like any good BBEG. BBEG, I will wait patiently for my food to come to me.
I see.
Well, I have cast Wizard Eye, so I know where you are.
I better get my entire dungeon lined with lead then.
Say hello to everybody who's in chat at the moment. General Nut, Guppild Slan, Halakar, Omanal, Jean. Hello, fellas. Don't think we've got any ladies in yet. We do occasionally have ladies watch us, but all fellas at the moment. At least I'm assuming they are. Right. How's gaming been treating you chaps?
Like a baby treats a diaper.
Oh, that bad. You mean it's been very smelly and dumping on you from a great height?
Something like that.
And smearing your face in it.
I haven't run any games this week. It was sort of a weekend off after last weekend, which was like back to back to back to back. But right. I did play in a couple of games. One was the Paint by Numbers 5e, so it was like fun to meet some people. It was a public game at the Toronto D&D group, but the game itself was yeah. And my character in an OSE game I'm playing in died yesterday. The DM decided that the undead are too weak and the clerics turn them too easily in Old School Essentials, so he's upped the numbers, so our clerics couldn't turn any undead and got butchered.
Right, he's done it on the spur of the moment.
I don't know if it was spur of the moment or planned or if it's part of the scenario, but it seemed that he was whining it was too easy to complain or too easy to turn them. So it seemed that way. I don't know. I might be talking out of my arse, but
isn't that the whole shtick of a cleric, though? Isn't it at low levels?
Especially at first level, yeah. First level OSE clerics don't even get spells. It's the only power you got.
Yeah.
Imagine our surprise when the small army of skeletons came at us, and two clerics successfully turned undead. And there was he was like, "Nope, they don't turn." I'm like, what? Wait, what?
We're already being called nerds.
Oh, here we are.
There's Hungar. Hello, Hungar. Let's say hello to some more people who've joined us. Hungar has obviously joined us with a bang. Crafting Gamers here. Calvin Noni's here. But thank you, Hungar. Hope you're well. Hope you've managed to get out of that place again. Hope you're not stuck there for too long this time. But good to chat to you yesterday, and I hope you're doing fine. Saxius, have you played at all recently? I know you've been saying you've been very busy with work so the time of year.
As I said, April, close to the end of the financial year. I had my Saturday game, which was fun. The players were in a cave system, and out of sheer desperation for getting rid of effectively crocodile lizard people, one of the wizards basically stayed behind and used fireball to make quick work of them. Though, as we had established very early on in the campaign, there are sonic backfires from our fireballs. Ergo, he got to make some system shock savings, and he had to be dragged out by the other players who had to rush back, get his unconscious body, get him back out, and the players are sort of like, cavalry has arrived from the Necromancer Empire, and they now have to sit down and decide which of the big three they're going to be taking on, because they have Drow knocking on their doorstep. They have the Yonti, who has set up shop and are entering the hibernation state, and they don't want them to survive this winter unless they return. And they have learned of a lich that is to the hills north of them, who specializes in demonology. So they need to pick one or two of these threats and deal with this head on and get this addressed, because the longer they're protracting this, the closer every enemy is on ensnaring them. And they're very well aware that right now they have breathing room, but every day counts. So, yeah, I could just get to sit and just sort of hit my watch and go tick tock, as they're going to have to speed things up.
My game on Saturday was the opposite of that. I ran a game of MERP on Saturday, and my Saturday group had been playing MERP as it should be played, very patiently, doing what they can to avoid direct combat, because combat is brutal in that game, trying to get every little advantage they can in terms of using the environment, and generally playing very sensibly. Now, I'd set up a little investigation scenario. It's taken from the Arnor material, whereby in the village of Sarn Ford, on the edge of Cardalan, on the banks of the Brandywine, the village of Sarn Ford is a frontier village. It's had a lot of trouble over the years. It's been trashed to the ground and rebuilt, and trashed to the ground and rebuilt. And at the moment, it's pretty lawless, though there is a detachment of Arthedain soldiers on the banks, on the other side of the river, in an old keep. But of course, while they try to keep order in the general area, they've got no real jurisdiction in Cardalan, which is now pretty much ruled by individual settlements. There's no overarching government. Cardalan has pretty much collapsed. And in this village of Sarnford, an old sorcerer who's lived in the village for 20 odd years, in the guise of a herbalist, has got connections with someone in Angmar, and he knows of what method was used to trash that a previous incarnation of the keep in Arthedain territory. A demon troll was summoned thousands of years before. But he discovered the ritual. He discovered how it was done. And the session before, my group was unraveling quite who the bad guy was and picking up little clues as to what's generally going on. So I thought this session, I expected some form of confrontation with him. I planned for him to breathe life back into a couple of bodies he'd got stored in the cellar of his shop, perhaps, to give the players a bit of a scare. And I thought it would all take probably 3 or 4 hours to all pan out. But no. They observed his movements, broke into his shop when he wasn't there, stole the evidence needed to implicate him in what he was doing, crossed the river, went to see the Arthedain prince that was running the garrison over there, and persuaded him with a good roll and evidence to help them track down this evil sorcerer who was clearly threatening the whole region, because the prince would be summoned at the site of where his keep was. And they just went and arrested the old man and had him executed. And that was that. And the whole session took about an hour and a half. And I was sat there twiddling my thumbs, going, okay, I'm not prepared for the next bit. This was to be the end of this sort of chapter, and I'd expected you all to get your second level here and work on which directions your characters are going in, and we appear to have done it all in an hour and a half. Great.
Nothing wrong with brevity.
No. But fair play to the players. They went about things a sensible way. Yes, General Nut. Yes. You were one of the players, and well played, fella. Well played. You all did the right thing. Okie dokie. Right, so let us proceed with our topic for tonight. Elf. I see Elfbait is lurking in chat. You're supposed to be working, Elfbait. You're supposed to have meetings and stuff. You're lurking in chat. Hello, Ian. Good to see you as well. Right, exploration. Now, when I described it as the forgotten tier in the title, it's because exploration is not presented in a lot of modern games in the manner to which many of us have become accustomed. Exploration for me is the essence of a good fantasy game. Look at how many of the great novels are based around journeys, travel. Look at all the descriptions in Hello, Nosorian. I've just been talking about MERP. But look how many of look at The Hobbit, for example, all those descriptions of the discomfort of the dwarves. They're getting rained on, they're hungry, they're getting grumpy, they haven't had a decent ale, and they're bickering and they're whining, and so much description is given over to their thoughts about their traveling, the journey, the exploration. They get lost in various places. Mirkwood, they get lost in the realms of the Goblin King. They stumble upon trolls in the forest, in the Troll Shores. A lot of it is about not knowing quite where they are or what they're going to come up against. And I think a lot of that is lost with a lot of, it seems to be, the modern adventures, the modern style of games that I've been certainly been exposed to. I know there are exceptions, for example, Tomb of Annihilation. But for me, the essence of a fantasy game is delving into the unknown. And delving into the unknown is exploration, whether it be overland or underground or in a city. That is exploration. Do you have any other definitions for it?
Not really. That's pretty much spot on.
Well, it's also uncovering the insights, because the exploration, yes, in the physical sense, you are going to be doing the exploration of going into the unknown, charting it, learning about it, and bringing it back. But it's also going to be the exploration of your environment. You can still have city crawls, city explorations, where you are going to be learning things that are unknown, and there's also going to be the exploration of information, which is often something that I think also needs to be stressed. You need, as characters, to be informed, and it needs you to explore the social world you've entered into, the social hierarchy. Who is who, where is what, what's the ecosystem you've entered into. To a certain extent, I would argue you also have those social explorations, because they can also yield very important information, sometimes crucial information and gossip that you wouldn't otherwise know.
True, though it's not generally thought of as being part of the exploration tier of gaming, though. Generally, the definition, when you talk of the 3 tiers of gaming: combat, roleplay, and exploration, and what I'm saying is, it's certainly, there's more of a shift towards the role play and the combat, and I do feel a lot of the more modern games that I've played, and more modern adventures I've experienced, a lot has been taken away of the going into the unknown, and much more emphasis has been put on big fight,
we
Mhm.
can
bit of conversation, move to another big fight.
we can get into that conversation when we get further into this, because I will
Oh,
repeat
we
myself.
will. Oh, we
Yes.
will.
Yes.
But exploration isn't just the physical for me, it's not just the physical aspect of exploring. It's the preparation. It's the consequences, and it's the sense of caution when exploring as well. Those are another three concepts from exploration that I feel have been pushed into the background, hand waved away, often by using game mechanics to minimize their impact.
The question really boils down to, what is the game you are playing?
Yeah,
Because if we are starting out by saying you are dungeon delvers, you are going to be hired by a wizard, by a cleric, by whoever, to go out beyond the wilderness into this area where an old temple was located, where you shall delve down to find a specific, scroll or something that is believed to be in there. You will now go there. You are the tomb raiders to go henceforward and do all of these things. Right there, that's the setup for the exploration, with a heavy focus towards the progress over there. You have to go beyond where it is considered civilized. You're going to have to go to where it's dangerous, and you're going to have to delve into where it is dark and forgotten, probably with monsters. Right there, you've got the setup to justify all of this. If you, on the other hand, you've just simply got a bunch of mercenaries who just wants to basically travel from city to city and just take the odd jobs going around, usually just traveling via public roads, or even just traveling as caravan merchants and the likes, not really wanting to do that whole exploration, and then you're going to have a very different game. But that there's no need to focus on the exploration if there isn't that buy-in, and that really is the key thing. It's also one of the reasons, as we've said when we were talking about the rangers, if you're going to go out and do exploration, you need a ranger.
Mhm.
You cannot go in there without having a ranger,
Or somebody with ranger adjacent abilities, like if you're playing
Yes.
5e, the survival skill and stuff like that.
Yeah, even then, like, you need someone who is able to track, who can got weather senses, who are familiar with animals, capable of handling animals, capable to, like, yes, people mock second edition
druids come into play there as well, don't they?
Absolutely. Like, you need nature oriented characters. Like, even a barbarian will be a major boost for having someone who can then sit down and go, well, I literally live in a tent made out of hides. Ergo, I would know these things. And yes, most people can say, oh, but I know how to make a fire. But do you know how to make a fire when it is absolutely raining cats and dogs?
Yes.
No. Like, most characters will just be like, no, because you're normally inside a pre-built house where you've got, a chimney and a fireplace built to maximize out the fire from the resources you put in there. You're not used to being in situations like that. That's not what you can do. So that's where it changes. I think that's going to be the focus.
Have I missed? Oh, sorry. Have I missed something from Hungar? Because
yeah, he bought some memberships for the audience.
Thank you, Hungar. As you know, it doesn't show up in StreamYard. I don't see it, but you've turned people green. Thank you, Hungar. Good man. Good man. So make sure you say thanks to Hungar if you've just turned green. You've got a new hue to your name. But yes, sorry, Saxius. I did.
I'm with you, absolutely. But like, if you are going to go out there and do that, then yes. But there's going to be different kinds of. It's well, we agree it's a different game. Players are also going to have to come in and do a little bit of prep work. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love being the ranger, because I will just go onto YouTube, and I will watch bushcrafts. I will watch all of these, rangers, and I will shut up, child.
Just bear with me a moment.
All right. Anyway, it's just going to be you and me, Sean, now.
Just you and me. Now we can plot.
Exactly. He's got nothing to stop us. I'm
back.
disagreeing with anything that's said so far.
Yeah, he's just expanding on it, and that's absolutely right. I mean, I think the real crux of it, I mean, and people were commenting on it being the forgotten tier, is it's because everybody here is old school. It's the modern inclination, even 5e, especially in 5e, where they're just so focused on the narrative element, where it's like, okay, we have to get to these ruins. All right, the dungeon master says it's 3 days over those hills into the forest. You arrive after 3 days, subtract 3 days of rations, and and then you make somebody with a ranger, or you make a ranger or a wilderness character. It's like, hello, why am I here then? Right?
Yeah.
And they just want to get to the meat. They want to get to the narrative high points. So they're bypassing the whole game aspect of exploring, of taking your time, of resource management. All of that stuff is part of exploration, and it's whisked away in the modern system, and it's unfortunate. It can be easily brought back, but players who are taught on the new system, it's alien to them. This idea that you have to think your way through getting to the adventure.
Yes, and I mean, I'm going to use my Curse of Strahd game because that's the one I've recently finished, and one of the things I more or less sort of beat into the players was simply the fact that you are going to be in danger when you're not in civilized areas, and the players would go out of their way to do everything they could to keep themselves, as safe away. If it was anywhere from what was it, like the Dragonborn would then bring out things to like hide their scents. They would then basically start buying clothes that would be more camouflaged, especially since it's dark, so easier to move around. They would have other things that would minimize the light that they would give out, because they knew that if you are having a bright light in Barovia, that is a beacon for many, many, many things to come knocking in the night. And
say hello to Elfbait. Welcome.
It helps if I convert time correctly.
No.
Is that the mistake you'd made?
So I work on a West Coast schedule, but I live in the Midwest. And so between converting for time for your channel, converting for time for my work meeting, and converting time for where I live, something got mixed up in the jumble there.
These things happen, though.
Yeah, I'll probably have to ditch out early rather than start late.
Oh, good. So, exploration. How about you, Eli?
I've been probably accused of spending way more time on exploration in my games than anything else because I really like it. So my players are often, okay, can we get there? Can we get there? Well, and like Tolkien and other authors, I mean, I'll describe menus and feasts, and because I consider that kind of part of the exploration too, learning about the world. And I get caught up in that stuff.
I think the key. People say, "Oh, this tier is most important," or "This tier is most important," whatever. For me, the key to running a good game is balancing them out.
Oh, absolutely.
And getting, yes, you can have entire sessions of roleplay. Yes, you can have big, massive combats from time to time. Yes, you can have 2 or 3 sessions where you're just getting from one place to another. But if that's every session, then it can become tedious. So you have to try and mix it all in, so you've got a bit of a fix of everything. Not that sort of balance. Not that sort of balance. I like I like balancing the tiers of the game and the spotlight of the game. I don't care about teasing mechanics. Yeah,
it all works out in the wash, though. Yeah, you go with what the moment is. You don't know. You don't necessarily plan. Okay, we're going to sit down. We're going to have an entire role play session, but it could work out that way.
It can work out that way. Yeah. And certainly, I mean, I think in our MERP game we haven't had a combat for 4 sessions now, but that's mainly because the players themselves have been avoiding combat when there have been combat opportunities presenting themselves.
And now we carry over to our previous stream on player agency.
Exactly. So what are the knock-on effects of shunting the exploration tier into a lesser position? I've already mentioned the three things that I think are missing, the things I like: preparation, consequences, and caution. Prepare for the journey. I don't mean role play every single encounter with a shopkeeper. I just mean making sure you've got your rations, you've got think about buy a horse, maybe a cart to carry things in, and all these things that add a little bit of verisimilitude to the idea of tramping through the countryside, and that can add a lot of fun to the game.
Absolutely, especially when they forget something important. Most players won't forget rations, but
that's where we come to consequences.
Spare wheel for the wagon.
Spare wheel, or bedrolls, even people,
or trying to decide that you want to carry 20 wine bottles to the dragon's lair so you can come back with all of its blood to sell as a magical component. So I've got I'm looking at my players. You really want to carry that many glass bottles all the way to the mountains, up the mountains. Like, we can do it. I'm like, it actually costs them extra money because their hirelings are like, no, we're not doing pack animal stuff unless you pay us a quarter share each.
Buy a mule.
I'm a soldier, not a porter.
Pretty much, exactly. They're like, we're soldiers.
I started as an experiment a 1E game last year where I basically said, right, the majority of the players were 5th edition players, and I told them off the back, this is not 5th edition, it's 1E, we're going to do something you've never done before. And it's going to be heavily focused on exploration, excavations, and, traveling. So I laid out to them that every time they're going to go out, it's going to be a major incursion. They're going to go out and they're going to hire like 20 laborers, 20 hirelings are going to be coming along with them, from guards to workers to engineers, all of these things. And the players bought into that. It became a big thing. All their little side quests was just to accumulate up the wealth so that they could go and hire, a caravan of X size with these abilities so that they could go over to the dungeon so that they could do certain things. And it became a major center point of like getting the caravan, protecting the caravan along the way. And when they arrived there, having the caravan then basically use the caravan and the abilities of the people to then sort of go, right, we've now hit a dead end because of a cave-in, get the miners in. And then we're going to go explore the other side while they're doing their work here. We've got guards over here, so if anything happens, they're protected because at the very least they've got level 1 level 1 sergeant that's going to help them. And then they go around and do that. And that was a major centerpiece. They didn't have a wizard, so they brought a scholar with them. And he was just there, happily copying everything he could. So
yeah.
And I bet as DM you were there beaming with pride when they were doing this.
The players loved it. They were also brand new to 1st edition, so they weren't quite sure, what worked, what didn't work. So we would have like an orc assassin, we would have this, and we would have a cleric of like, I don't have the stats to be a druid, but can I just basically be a druid? Like, you're a cleric of nature. I'm happy with that. Off you go.
I have to admit, I was kind of very happy that my players decided to spend 1.5-2 sessions just doing prep before they headed out. I'm like, because that means that tells me that they're engaging with the setting and the situation on a level that's more than we got to go kill the thing. So
yeah, and it's also really important because, as you said, it brings the engagement in, but it also shows that the players are approaching it with a plan. At least it's something that is somewhat sensible that you can work with as a DM, because you plan for a lot of things. But as you're hearing what they're buying and what their intentions are, and we're now going to go and do this, we're going to go and do that, suddenly you start going like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, we should have some obstacles where they need to get out some shovels and pickaxes. That's actually not a bad idea. Or actually, the fact that they've brought out rope and these other things, we can now start having an easier access into sarcophaguses. I can actually start putting some, mummies or other things down into these things. And you can start to see what the abilities are, what possibilities you can exploit out of challenges towards the players from what they've brought with them.
My players even started recruiting NPCs they'd encountered throughout the campaign.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
oh yeah,
including a retired player character.
Nice.
But they also I think I've mentioned it before. There's a half ogre blacksmith that works in the area, and they went and got him because he used to mercenary along with one of the characters' granddads, and so
that's awesome.
And I mean, the next thing I had for this was a lack of the exploration tier lends itself to the party having a lack of caution, and having enhancing the exploration tier makes the party more cautious, in my opinion, because it brings a sense of importance to the travel and the dangers of wilderness.
Yeah, it reminds them that dangers are around the corner, not just planned as a beat in a narrative.
Yes.
I would disagree, but that's because I would cite Tucker's kobolds.
Go on.
No? Okay.
Tucker's kobolds are nasty
I know,
and famous.
I know Tucker, yeah. I know Tucker's kobolds, but yeah, expand on that for our chat.
All right. Viet Con level strategies of hit and run tactics and ambushes against players in typically dungeons, to basically sort of hammer home that even the lowliest of kobolds and goblins can become your worst nightmare if they are run with a level of intelligence. Even average intelligence would allow you to do some horrifying things against your party. The point I'm trying to make here is that yes, the journey can instill that level of caution, but at the very same time, certain encounters, and if a DM plays the nature or even just plays into intelligent creatures being intelligent, then you can still bring out the whole level of cautiousness.
Yeah.
So.
But the two aren't mutually exclusive, though. Obviously, and getting used to the danger, the randomness of travel and danger, is just one way to remind players you are mortal. This trip can throw off your adventure, and we're not going to stick to a narrative.
I'm absolutely with you. And again, using my real life group as an example in this case, I mean, after they experienced Strat, and then I'm now taking them through Red Hand of Doom. Them meeting a ranger's wife had them on such high alert because they were just sitting. Some players were sitting and going, "It's Oscar. That's going to be a hack. We're going to be fed, kids. He's going to do terrible things to us. We're not going to do anything." Until they start realizing, oh wait, it is actually just a ranger's wife, and we're not. We've just been extremely paranoid. Just a happy side product of me being their DM.
Yeah. See, now you can throw all the mundane, ordinary, innocent things you want at their players, and they will be paranoid for life.
Yes, as it should be. I've got more things up my sleeve. I've got what are they called again? Were-Rachnias, the were-spiders. I've got one of those lined up in this module. So yeah. But anyway, going back to the exploration part, because I think we're emphasizing it, like the prep work is really important. The journey itself is really important. And how show of hands here, who here has had almost like an entire side quest or like a mini adventure in itself just from a random encounter that you've rolled up?
Almost routinely.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My little puppet hand is up.
I have to be careful, in fact, not to throw out too many of those little interesting tidbits. Otherwise, we never get anywhere. Yeah.
But in a sandbox campaign, that doesn't matter. It's what happens is the adventure. I mean, you guys follow my show, and you've seen certain encounters have dominated because that was just a random encounter that the players decided to pursue.
Yeah, sometimes the players, though, I've found, and this is the problem I have with that, is like my group of players want to get to the goals and let themselves get distracted and then get frustrated because it takes forever to get there. So I think sometimes players don't always see what's best for them or know their own their own desires and goals all that well, or lose sight of them. So,
and that's fair, but
Yeah.
again, they'll learn too. They'll start. It's an evolution in how we play the game, and what we learn is eventually start seeing those opportunities rather than seeing it as a distraction from what you want.
Yeah. It's seeing. Yeah, I couldn't put it any better myself, so I won't. Yes, encounters are opportunities. The dice are opportunities. So, what would you say is the best way to run exploration?
Know the environment.
How do you bring in the environment? How do you pace your exploration? And how random do you allow the random encounters to be?
I, for one, use a calendar. I know Gygax and them were super huge on calendars, and timekeeping. And I went to I've set up for this campaign that fantasycalendars.com or whatever it is. And it tracks weather, temperature, phases of the moon. You can plunk all your holidays in your area there. And I use a lot of that to reinforce the travel times and stuff. Like every so often I'll just tell the players it's only 2 weeks till Dragonflight, or it's been a week since you left home and you missed the spring festival. Just kind of remind them of their wanderings, but also we have a character in the party who actually has to know about the phases of the moon, and I could sit there and say, all right, the third moon is full.
No, I'm with you. It's the same as all of the sheet.
Yeah, and just being able to tell them, you wake up in the morning and it's a misty, foggy day. I can sometimes slip in accidentally into a weather report. Well, it's partly cloudy. Temperatures are going to run.
And the wind is blowing
that helps a lot.
5 miles an hour, northwest.
Quick plug. I mean, if people aren't using that particular application, it's super useful because you can set holidays to revolve on specific days, phases of the moon, every 100 years. You can also place notes on your calendar. So I use it also as a campaign log. Every major event gets noted on my calendar. And then I can say, all right, you've been away from home for a month.
I mean, I've got to just open up the one that I'm using for my 1-player 1DM, and just looking at like the first month, 12 calendar days in, the first character dies and the next one starts. Then he survives for about 11 days, and then we restart for the next character that begins. And now we are, 1, 2, 3, almost like 4 weeks in for the fourth character that's surviving almost an entire month, just for us to keep track of like the death rates of the ongoing characters.
Yeah, I printed up just a blank calendar template, printed up dozens of those sheets, and I just handwrite as we go. It's like, okay, well, we started on the 1st of the month, and it's like you travel for 7 days. And then if we're at the table, of course, I use the DMG's metric for encounter checks. If you're in the forest, for example, you're checking every 3 hours, 6 checks a day. Right. And then so on. Or if they're in the plains, it's 3 checks a day. And then just make a note. Okay, well, they rested here, or they encountered something here, or what's going on. Yeah. But yeah, the environment will be, of course, catered. So like I'll usually, if I know they're traveling in mountains, I'll create mountain encounters. I won't just use a blank a broad encounter chart, so they're not going to be encountering ocean creatures. So I'll cater it to creatures that will live in the mountains. So that's I had to do that, but beyond that, no, it's just see what comes. Sometimes I'll even roll the terrain randomly.
Well, now that we've brought us over to terrain, because that was the next point I wanted to bring out. As I said, you got to know your environments. So, what is the ecology that you care of walking through? Is it forests? What kind of forest? Are we talking European? Are we talking, Eurasian European? Are we talking Asian, forests? What are we looking at here? Because then there's going to be all sorts of hazards that's going to be coming along with that. And then, of course, temperatures, everything else. Because the one thing that I absolutely love to do, is to monitor what the temperatures are at the highest and at the lowest. And then when the nights come along, it's like, so who has got what? What are you sleeping in? Oh, you're just sleeping in your, banded armor and your chainmail. That's adorable. Roll me some constitution checks, because you are going to be freezing your ass off at about 8 degrees Celsius, dropping down to about 4 or maybe 3 degrees Celsius.
I've had it affect their supplies.
Yeah.
If they're
You'd
not,
love some of the MERP source book sections for that.
No,
It goes into that level.
I've been digging a bit, yes, but as Eli was saying, resources. You can have
your torches are damp, or the feed for the horses is starting to mildew because you've been traveling 7 days in the rain.
And there's going to be cases of, recently. I say recently, a few months ago, my players had to deal with the fact that the Yuan-Ti literally pulled the sun closer to the planet, causing a massive heat spike.
Just some subtle magic there.
Just like level
That's a cantrip for 5e types.
It's just like it's a minor what's it called, loan of a 10th level spell that they just did. That's beside
I'm great that you're all really, really organised with all of this, because don't tell my players in chat, but I make most of it up as I go along.
I know you do. I can hear the ice when you tell me these things. It is. No, sorry. Let me get some music in for this. It's about a moderate day with clouds, a little bit of wind from the side.
You've never played in one of my games, Saxius.
No, I haven't.
You're walking through a forest with some sort of thump trees.
And there's 17 bushes.
Although I have to say, because my players have crisscrossed across their particular game world so many times, I find myself kind of eye rolling when I've got to describe the same rolling hills and rocky plains land.
Yeah, but at one point you can legitimately, without ruining the game, sort of hand wave. It's like you're traveling through familiar territory. This is the way it is. Nothing
exactly,
changed.
and I'll often phrase that. I'm like, so once again, you're heading northward through territory you've tramped before.
I
can even use it to lull them into a false sense of security.
Oh god, yeah. But ask yourself, if you are routinely traveling from one place to another, and at the beginning, couple of dozen or so times, you're going to be paranoid, but eventually you start easing your way, and the areas, the bends. It's like when you're driving to and from work, you just get used to these things. So of course it's the perfect place to ambush you, because you've got you're settled in, you know the routine.
You drop your guard.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you driven to work? How many times have you driven to work, and it's so much of a routine that you don't
once they start to learn
realize
that,
you get there.
Once they learned, it's frightening. Actually, I drove all the way home from work one day and realized I didn't consciously think about any move on the entire drive.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my! It scared me for a second. I'm like, I just drove 30 minutes and don't remember any of it. But no, once they get familiar with the area too, you can start using that as part of your narrative. Like, there's been a few times where they're going somewhere where they know, and I'll describe something on the horizon that they can see, and then that puts it into context for them. Like, okay, you're heading southwards towards home. You see columns of smoke on the horizon. Oh crap! Because they know what's there.
Yes, they notice something different. They notice something's changed. Right, I think now's a good time. I've got 5-starred comments. So
5 stars.
So let's
5 stars in Yelp.
Let's have a little look. A slightly throwaway comment from General Nut early on that I quite liked. I just thought it was amusing. The only tier that matters. What were the others? They are the forgotten ones.
What are the tiers? Sorry.
I don't know. I forgot.
Exploration, combat, and so on.
Oh, you've remembered them, have you?
Oh, you remember? You just ruined the joke.
You just ruined the joke. Yes, the title of the stream is Exploration of the Forgotten Tier. So I just thought.
Sorry, but us Northern European descended types don't really joke.
Not really. Like, how many times have I shown up here? Like, my sense of
is this humor? We are Germans. We don't do humor.
We are efficient. We only need one man and one
yeah.
light bulb, and everything is solved.
I am accused constantly of not getting the joke, and I don't know how many times I'd be hanging out with my friends. They're like, blah 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 blah. I'm like, no, and they're like, dude, I'm kidding. I'm like, oh, that might be a little bit of as DK likes to say, the tisms, though. So,
yeah.
Sarcasm, the chasm between the author of sarcastic wit and the person who doesn't get it.
I just thought it was a chasm full of a really bad flu virus, but.
So, Omanal has a point here. The issue, and Omanal wouldn't know about this sort of thing, being a self-confessed power gamer who's trying to break away from it. The issue is exploration doesn't directly give XP. In standard D&D rules, it doesn't. There are systems that do give out XP for exploration by default. I mean, Merc does. But there is a point there that the players will tend to focus on things that are giving them tangible rewards, and wandering around chatting, eating rations doesn't always do that. So certain types of players won't be interested in that.
Yeah, I tend to try to give out role-playing XP as well as exploration XP, but not for every little discovery. Like major discoveries, learning something important about the world, as long as it's something that is a result of the players' actions, the players and their characters' actions. I mean, being told a bunch of stuff randomly by an NPC doesn't get you XP for exploration.
No.
But I mean,
if you
sorry, go on.
Sean.
I was going to say the flip side of that is that exploration does give XP because you encounter things. It becomes part of the adventure.
That is true.
Yes, but you can also argue that the encounter it's its own little thing of you have to now either overcome or circumvent a creature, and usually the way that the books are written is that you gain the XP through defeating it, which is often interpreted as killing or getting it to run away. But that's then down to the DM to be smart and experienced and go like, if you lot at level 3 are going to be taking on a tribe of 12 trolls, I mean, you clearly want new characters. It's all good for you.
But the point is that it is part of the experience, and maybe it doesn't have direct XP that might be tied into a scenario. It is still a potential source of adventure and XP, especially if the random encounter does have a high yield treasure, which can happen. Like I'm thinking, of course, from an AD&D perspective, where treasure is XP. But
I'm with you. But so going over to maybe the other side of this, edition spectrum. You've also got a lot of the exploration, at least building on Omanal's point here. A lot of the modules that are being bought in, or a lot of the stories or the games that are being made are made with sort of like a very like A, B, C, and D kind of narrative. Ergo, there isn't a need for the exploration. Ergo, there won't be a need for actually giving XP for it because it's not accounted for. You will go from point A to point B or from point A to point C,
right.
So forth, because that's how the DM probably does it. It's an easy way of doing it.
Yeah.
Compared to a sandbox where it's just like, players are going to go where they're going to go. I mean, I'm just going to give them pain.
And I don't disagree with the point. I think it's more of a design flaw, right? And, you want to encourage people to enjoy the exploration aspect, whether or not there's a direct XP reward, because it is still part of the game. It is still part of the story.
Yeah. Okay, the next one I've got starred here is from Nosorian. I found experience and advancement some of the easiest things to adapt to your taste in the system, but if the general rules for exploration are bad, there's little you can do. I mean, certainly I'm going to cite 5th edition as an example, because that's possibly the most egregious one in terms of minimizing the impact of the exploration tier. I mean, without taking away certain spells and abilities, and thus potentially annoying the players, he's right in a sense there.
I don't know. I would say to me at least, exploration is the one pillar, tier, whatever you want to call it, that is the least dependent on game system, because you can explore and discover completely free of mechanics. It's just your players have to want it, and you have to put it out there. But
I mean, a game system can have mechanics to help exploration have an impact. I've heard is it Forbidden Lands mentioned quite a lot about that, how that handles exploration in terms of resources. People, I know, if Omanal was about, he'd be banging on about Forbidden Lands now, because of the way.
Take a drink, Omanal.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think that you would necessarily have to have mechanics or a system for exploration itself. Things that support it, obviously, but that's like ammo tracking, resource management, things like that. Navigation checks and all of that. But I don't know if that's in the same level of rules as, say, combat or like skill systems and stuff like that.
I know there were a lot of rules in early versions of D&D for getting lost.
Yes,
but they tend to be buried and rarely used in my experience.
Maybe building on Sarian's comment here, because I can understand the point. If there isn't a framework for how to conduct exploration, then that makes it difficult for a DM who isn't experienced in it, or for someone who doesn't have either the life experience or would be able to translate the information that they would get elsewhere into, this is how this game is. Because if you haven't experienced what it's like to be in like -10 and beyond degrees Celsius, it's really difficult to convey out, what that experience is like. Equally so, I died the moment we start hitting 25 degrees Celsius and above. I just can't cope with that. So whenever I'm told like, we're hitting 23, 26 degrees Celsius, I'm just like, oh god, my character's dying. It was like, what? You're meant to be from like the equator. It's like, oh yeah, right, sorry. It's just suddenly it's just like, oh yeah, of course, my character's used to this, and just me, I'm dying.
Yeah, I get that. Coming from the Northwest and moving to Missouri was in the summer was impactful. Let's just put it that way.
But that's my point. Is like I understand that mechanically, if there isn't like a baseline, if there isn't that foundation to look at and go, even if it isn't for the sake of just rolling or using it for the sake of, you're going exploring, roll this, roll that. Actually, on knowing like when you start getting into like 30 degrees Celsius, you running around in padded armor and a chainmail, you are gonna have a very rough time. I mean, just thinking historically to Crusaders when they were running around in the Middle East with their armor on, I dread to think what that was like.
I think every player of fantasy RPG should be forced to spend an entire summer afternoon at a Ren fair in costume. Then they'll have some idea. Your feet are killing you. Your legs want to buckle by the end of the day.
Yeah, but also people who live in that world will be conditioned for it.
That is true.
We're not conditioned for it.
No. Yeah, I do understand what's being said. Certain suspension of disbelief. Like, you are a farmer, you're used to heavy work, you're used to that when it comes to this time of year that this happens, yada yada yada. But it's still certainly worth knowing how to convey that in. Like, again, I'm just going to use heat as an example. If it becomes too warm and you're traveling, I mean, that's going to be exhaustion points. It's going to be penalties to your combat. It's going to be penalties to your defenses.
Double your water intake.
Double your water intake. Slow down your movements. Marching under the beating sun is just horrific. Very few people are conditioned to actually endure that.
Speaking of water, the next comment I wanted to bring up, just to applaud Halakard's players here. My players earned a pony and cart as reward for helping some townspeople, and the first things they bought was a 10-gallon barrel for extra water. I was quite impressed.
God damn, that's clever.
I'd be more than quite impressed. I'd be, yes, well done.
Yeah. I remember my players would bring dog food when they had how many did they have? It was like 8 or 9 dogs that they bought and gathered up with them. So they would just be logging with them like so much food for those dogs and a lot of treats because they are good doggos.
So yes. El made a comment here that in responding to, I kind of got to think, I wonder if some of the hatred, or not hatred, but dislike of exploration as a tier just comes down to the average game session having shrank so much in modern gaming. The old AD&D rules are written for 6 to 8 people with 6 to 8 people with a game session averaging 8 hours or more. Yeah. And now we're looking at 4 to 6 players,
3 hours.
Averaging 4 hours, 3-4 hours. So I can understand a resistance to spending time with, Peter Jackson like travel montages and all the stuff that happens along the way, because you just don't want to have time. I understand. I don't agree with it. I like exploration. Like I said, I'm guilty of over leaning on that one maybe, but I could see how that might have developed out of the modern, just the time people have for it.
And the idea of one shots. You're not going to spend a lot of time exploring if you have to get the session done in 4 hours and then everybody's done.
Yeah. But I also think a lot of people forget the fact that a lot of those original modules, even back in the day, there wasn't a lot of exploration, at least outside of the dungeon. You started at the door to the dungeon and started going if you're playing modules.
The exploration, though, was in the dungeon, and the party were expected to have prepared for it and brought 10-foot poles and enough food and water and enough light to be able to navigate through the dungeon, possibly for days on end.
And I don't really feel like people are skipping that aspect of exploration all that much in newer games. They're still going through and finding the puzzles and the traps and having to prepare the tools and stuff like that. Maybe not to the same degree, but they're still doing it.
One thing I will say there, though, certainly in fifth edition, there are so many more races that have got infravision, it takes away the effect of darkness to a degree. The dungeons I've seen have been a lot smaller. You rarely see those big sort of 50-60 room behemoths nowadays. A lot of dungeons.
The Gygaxian dungeon is gone.
And the actual speed of movement through the dungeon, movement rates of characters. It's no longer you move 90 feet in a turn, carefully mapping. You're moving 30 feet in a turn being 10 minutes. You're moving 30 or 40 feet in 6 seconds a lot of the time, according to the game rules.
Combat time and travel and exploration time, delving time, or whatever you want to call it, have always been different, though.
Yeah, that's true. But there's no sort of codified delving time really put into 5th edition nowadays. So it tends to be, how long you've been in the dungeon for? About an hour. And they've done tons in there. Whereas going back to earlier versions of D&D, you could spend the first 3 hours of a day going through the first 3 rooms. Because it takes 10 minutes to check for traps or look for secret doors. It takes 10 minutes to map out 60 foot of corridor. Anyhow, this was the fifth one. I've got 46 comments to check up on after we get through all these starred ones. So I will. Rag Prime says, I roll for weather when they return to an underground ruin because a flooded ruin presents different challenges to places they've visited before. That's really good. I like that. May have to employ that myself. But that's using a game's. I mean, certainly in some games there are weather mechanics built in. MERP has them, where you've got weather tables for all the regions, and a decent DM can always produce their own weather tables and apply them. We've already discussed weather, but I just thought that was a constructive little comment. I'm adding Omanal to our stream. I mentioned
Hello,
Forbidden
sir.
Lands clearly summoned him.
Well,
So
yeah,
while you're,
and I just made sure I had to bring this out, for this. And anyone that's, well, it's not just that version. Then you have the ice version, and then I'll get the third version once they release it. But I'm still waiting for
I was
that.
going to say,
But
while Omanal's giving his hellos, I'm going to go through the other 46 comments that that I haven't read yet.
I think that, while we're talking about this is, like I was mentioning, G1, G2, and G3. Those are perfect examples of where players have to travel from one location to another with a long, and that's great if you make that as part of a campaign. Otherwise, you just do what you says. We'll fast forward through all that. And there are times to fast forward. If you don't think anything's going to happen, it's okay to fast forward. But when you want to make it really dangerous and make places inaccessible, exploration has to be forefront. If I say no one's traveled into X area, I have to make that arduous to get to in the first place. Otherwise, players will just be like, why isn't everyone going there?
That's why I tend to make all my random encounter rolls at the top of the travel day. Because if nothing happens, I can narrate it as an uneventful travel day. I can, and then if I know how many, encounters there's going to be in a day, I can then pace those or actually place them where they make sense, even though they're random. Like I can at least stage them, so not every dragon just drops out of the sky. You're not suddenly overrun by 50 bandits who came out of nowhere.
Just going to say, Elfmate, I agree with you that kobolds are little devil dogs.
Yeah, I do prefer the original AD&D devil dog. Yeah.
That's the bit I've come to as far. You four keep going. I'm getting down chat.
No, but rolling ahead of time does help you frame those encounters. So a dragon encounter could start with finding a bunch of half-eaten sheep littering the countryside and some footprints. Go ahead.
No, I just saw where Crafty Matt had put in, the 5-room dungeons. 5-room dungeons are perfect for as you're traveling. It's a random dungeon. They're easy to create. You can do it very quickly, and then you can mark it on your map. And I think that's the other thing of, we're talking about exploration, but there's also the aspect of hex crawling where players don't know anything out there. And by doing that, they fill in the map as they go along. And if you have some of these random encounters, like these little mini dungeons, you can put them there. Oh, this is the cairn of the blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is the troll. And you don't have to put a lot of effort into it and try to see if it makes sense and have one big adventure. It's like, oh, okay. Guess what? You found 15 kobolds and they're in, a little 5-dungeon room or, whatever. And that seems to work really well, I think. Like I know that Sean was talking about having the treasures. Well, you know what? You see a dragon. Okay, where's that dragon coming from? The dragon doesn't even have to do anything. You just see it fly over. It can set up those
world building aspects through encounters too. I had a party see the same griffin in the sky for 3 days once, and they're just like, is it following us? No, it's just a griffin. It lived in the valley that they were traveling across for several days, and of course they're going to see it in the air every day, but were they being, they started speculating on, like, are we getting spied on by something? Is it hunting us? No, it's just, it's hunting maybe, but it's maybe not hunting you.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But the other part is, and I know we were all talking about the exploration. Different times of the year, different times have certain things. Like we've all heard about. Well, I guess probably Elfie and I. What is it? Yosemite, where they have it where the falls look like they're on fire.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
I mean, that only happens like once a year at a certain time, and it's just how the sun strikes. Or the old solstices. It lines up perfectly. The conjunctions, and there's a lot of aspects that players kind of do that. Or the other part is if you're going over the same area over and over again, it changes over time. Anyone can look over at Google Earth and see, oh, there are flowers at this time, and then this time it's dry, and you can really bring out that sense of wonder.
A river they've crossed 3 times in the campaign could be running high one time, or almost gone. And
Oh yeah.
or it's 2 miles to the west.
Well, the other part is, whenever we talk about braided streams, over time they shift. Same thing with aquifers. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do to change your environment, so players feel that it's both dynamic and familiar at the same time. It's like, oh, well, this has changed. Okay, why has this changed? Oh, it just so happened that the water elemental got mad at the village and decided to, shunt the water off away
Giant
from the
beavers.
village. Yeah, well, you laugh at that, but you wouldn't believe in just how
Regular beavers do well enough,
Oh,
but giant
God.
beavers are a thing. So.
Oh, I know.
But I mean, and the thing is, a lot of times, it's just throwing that out there. It makes the world interesting, because then the players might be like, "What happened to the river?" And they start stalking upstream, and you're like, "Well, now I got to come up with something, but that could be something minor." You get up there and there's a log jam. Okay, well, why is there a log jam? Now they're going to start exploring that, and then you could either go with giant beavers, or maybe the trees have been felled on purpose, and hobgoblins.
I was thinking hill giants. I guess I'm
I surprised my party with hill giants that were actually not horrible monsters. They had actually gone to like raising cattle.
So I'm going to come now to we've already hinted at the way people play nowadays having an impact on the exploration tier, and in terms of the length of the session, the size of the group, and all that sort of stuff. But also, you have the impact of online play and virtual tabletops, and for me, they take a fair bit of the wonder out of exploring a location, because you can pretty much work out the size of the map from looking at the tabletop. And what seems to have gone from the game nowadays is the idea of somebody in the party keeping a map and the whole group having to refer to that map to see where they are. They may have made mistakes in the map. And now what you see on a virtual tabletop, everywhere's revealed where you've been. So
it depends on your virtual tabletop, because I know Foundry,
yes.
I can get it where it only shows like where you
are. Yeah.
That's it. And it's like, oh,
I don't use Foundry. So
Well, you can do it on Roll20 too.
Yeah.
my computer can't cope with the dynamic lighting on Roll20.
but that's the whole part of it is, you move through it, and that makes it really interesting, especially if the problem I have with most maps is, well, a lot of them is they're not as big as they used to be. It sounds funny, on those little fold out boards, those were huge dungeons you look at what's compared to nowadays.
Yeah, I know the 5-room dungeon was mentioned, but the 5-room dungeon is a concept that often gets misunderstood and misquoted too, because it's not specifically 5 rooms, it's 5 rooms,
5 encounters, 5 things to do.
Not to mention you can do it fractally, where you just have it's thinking in 5s. Even if that dungeon is a total of 50 rooms, it's like you're working 5 rooms at a time and having them support one another. Anyways.
Well, sorry. I mean, speaking of rooms and the exploration is, a perfect example is anyone that watched the Lord of the Rings movie when they go to Moria. and you just see things going all the way through. I mean, there's so many fantastic things. To me, that's the whole part of it, of exploring ruins. That's whether it's Conan or Dinger or a lot of these is it's a world you don't know, which is one of the reasons I love. What is it? I1. You're going, which is the typical. I won't call it the Conan style because I've seen everything where it goes in there. You climb up the rocks into a hidden caldera. There's a city in there, and you have to learn about that city. Or, of course, the X-Men. You have to go explore the island to figure out how to get off, or something like that.
That is a sandbox, and sandbox style of adventures are much more heavily exploration based. It's something we have sort of discussed because your story based adventures, which seem to be in vogue at the moment, have very little exploration because it is the DM often taking the party from one set piece to whatever next set piece moves the story along, and people don't seem to have time for those bits in between.
Well, that's kind of a point crawl, I think, is how Eli would put it, or like he was talking about. If you look at B1, you're suddenly there. Your caravan's already been ambushed. You're thrown into this, and I don't mind those games either. It just depends on what's going on. I just want to make. I don't want to put this.
Or Tomoichin, where you just fall through the floor.
Yeah, well, I want to make it so it's the point of there are places that are relatively inaccessible, and you are explorers. You're going past what sane human beings would do. Where it's the Shackleton style. We're going to go to the Antarctic, and we're going to see we're going to find out where the South Pole is. Well, you know what? That sounds fantastic. Now let me go put a few encounters in there that, if all of a sudden they find a pyramid there, we'd be like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" Oh well, that's what we.
You know what I'm going to wave in front of the camera now.
Mountains of Madness.
Yeah. Yes. If you ever fancy going to the South Pole and go into intimate detail about what you need to wear and eat and all that sort of stuff,
and you mean dogs and eating wild?
Yes.
Steel fat.
You need to keep your huskies well fed and all that sort of stuff. It's all in there.
I was going what was it, Amundsen, or the first one actually?
Amundsen.
He ate his dogs. I mean, on the way back, and so did several of the other explorers that did make it. But that's the whole point. Is it's just like when you're a kid, you look over and you see the mountains. It's like, what's past the mountains? That's the whole point of being the adventure. And if you say, well, those mountains are dangerous, we don't know.
Does nobody remember the Bear Went Over the Mountain song when they were a kid? Come on. They were trying to teach us the splendor of exploration. Should we sing it over
now? So what really was the first module adventure? I was looking at this earlier, that really sort of emphasized the exploration tier above all others.
Was it S1 or S2 or X1? I mean,
Isle of Dread is one of the first hex crawls.
Yeah, for me it was X1. Yeah,
it was X1 was for me too. Although Keep on the Borderlands kind of does a little bit too, if you think about it. It's a big area that's really kind of doesn't tell the players to go in any particular direction right away.
Well, I'm
going to say a year or two before those, D1 and D2 Descent into the Depths of the Earth, because they even though they were sort of set adventuring locations, there was information in there to encourage the DM to develop the underworld and the network of passages, and to link the areas on the maps with all their own stuff, and just have the party exploring this unknown, vast labyrinth of caves.
That is something they like to do a lot in the old modules, if you think about it. Like, here's the whole module. By the way, there's other stuff here that you could be doing as well, but we'll leave that up to the DM.
I first saw that in D1 to 2.
Well, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was one of the first ones, by my understanding, that brought in the hex crawl over there. And I think the other part is, while we're looking at this, we also sometimes forget that if you look at the core books, it didn't have that much in there initially, and then they added it later on. Whether you get the Wilderness Survival Kit, the Dungeon Survival, the book, you get those, and then you get the, we have some of the benefits of looking back and having all of these books that came out over an 8-year period or so.
Yeah,
I really feel like those guides, the exploration guides, were kind of just pulling together a lot of stuff that had been already covered in the pages of Dragon and stuff like that.
Sure, I don't
not as directly as say like Unearthed Arcana, but like a lot of wisdom that had been accumulated over the decades or years.
I mean, like Saxius there was talking about the whole thing with the armor and the weight. I'm like, okay, I've been in 50 Celsius, and I've been in probably minus 15 or so Celsius, and it's probably been colder than that. But anyway, it's the whole point of those aspects is you're really getting into, how thick are you going, how quickly do you move. It's exhausting. Or the other part is you get hot, and you get cold, and you get hot, and you get cold.
I always love when my players want to sleep in their armor all the time. I'm like, all right, you realize you're not going to sleep very well. I mean, you can for a couple of days, and if you're a trained soldier and stuff, you can get used to it. But it's going to wear on you eventually. At some point, you need to snooze in a real bed.
I was going to say, this brings in things like having proper encumbrance tracking in a game, because it really that has a massive impact on exploration. Not
you
just
want me to do math? It's boring.
Yeah, and don't be the guy who decides to wear heavy metal armor on a nautical campaign. Come on.
No, that's easy. Having watched Ben-Hur, they did that. You just pushed in the water.
Yeah, because we were playing I've mentioned it before. We're playing my nautical game, and the guy at the paladin, he decides he's going to play a paladin, which is already, I'm like, okay. And then he's like, yeah, and I'm wearing chainmail. I'm like, all right. You realize that if you fall over, you're going to the bottom, right?
Well, this is where you get your bard. As much as everyone talks about it, wearing chain and making sure he has bagpipes. Because aren't there stories of them being pushed off the bridge in the water and being saved by the bagpipe? No. I mean, we're talking like historical incidents. I believe that's occurred.
I can envision it there. The bard, the person falling, all you hear is the bagpipe blowing because he's got to inflate it before he hits
the water landing. Your musical instrument can be used as a flotation device. Be right back, guys. I gotta go.
I take care.
Oh, you headed off, Saxius, or
no? Oh. Eli is.
He's just stepping away.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it was work.
But yeah, I mean, we've mentioned Isle of Dread, and that was an adventure specifically created to encourage the outdoor exploration, the idea of the hexagon. I see people are talking about it in chat, and I feel it did it very well. It gave you just enough to begin with, and enough space to work with, and make it your own. And it's a great place to drop other little adventures, modules into it, and in terms of a true exploration based adventure, that was probably the first true one in terms of.
Yeah. Did that come out before S3, Expedition to Barrier Peaks? Because I know that was.
I don't believe it. Barrier Peaks. Most of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks was in the spaceship itself.
But I thought it was one of the first hex crawls that was out there. I could be wrong, but
I don't remember that much of a hex. To be honest, I've never run Barrier Peaks. I don't like it, as you know. But what I know about it is the vast majority of it is centered on the actual spaceship.
I'm going to mention one other which is fine, because if you don't explore, you don't technically get the story going through. Is Pharaoh for the module? Is if you don't find where you fall in and unstop the cork and release the effort, you don't really have any reason to do the other two modules.
Yeah, that's an example of the exploration in that series is actually quite badly done originally, because the desert is, as presented, way too small.
I agree with that, but I mean, I love that exploration aspect, or where you've been pushed out in the desert and actually doing something.
But there isn't much. There isn't much in the way of exploration, despite it bigging itself up as being a horrific, vast desert. It's only about 20 or 30 miles across. It's ridiculous, which is a shame.
Well, 20-mile desert can be deadly and scary if you don't know which direction you're going.
Yeah. If you just go in a straight line, though.
Well, I'm going to mention one other thing about 5e is a lot of times, though, is that's a grittier style of campaign versus a more heroic style of campaign.
Yeah.
And as such, that's why it gets pushed off. But like I know we were talking about with Murph, there's a lot of walking between places, and they actually give you experience points for walking. You're like, okay. There's that aspect. Numenera, I mentioned, and those are big, thick books. I think part of the problem, though, is like Forbidden Lands does it. Conan could do some of it. A lot of games just don't have the old exploration style. Now, the old Dungeon Master's Guide used to have, roll to see what goes on with the dungeon and how it maneuvers around. And, watch you play your.
There's that in other editions of D&D as well. That's not just exclusive to the to AD&D. I mean, I remember certainly, I'm sure Basic had something similar. And I believe 5th edition's even got something similar. You can certainly create a dungeon to explore almost on the fly with that, which is
I had to shut my dog up.
One thing I'm going to bring in now, I've already mentioned virtual tabletops, but some people like playing with 3D terrain. And moving little models around 3D terrain, dungeons that are already set up. And I'm going to say now, if I turned up to a game and DM had all that, I'd be like, it all looks very nice. Thank you all for the effort, but this game is not for me. Because it takes away all the sense of wonder of exploring the dungeon for me, if it's all set up like that.
I just find it impractical. It's just too much.
I find it limiting. I've actually taught... when you are using physical terrain and models, you're either always going to be using the same familiar set pieces, or you're going to constantly be running yourself ragged building new ones, and you're never going to have every model that you're going to need for every encounter. Now, there's nothing wrong with, substituting things. We've all used Skittles and pennies and whatever. Some people use weird little folded paper counters with cartoon characters on them.
I don't know who you're talking about.
But the big thing that for me is I imagine that if you've got, all right, my collection is a village. I've got 3 rocky outcroppings, a dozen trees, a couple of river things. Those are going to constrain your imagination when it comes to staging encounters.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to also bring this up, which is I don't mind when they're proxies. It's when you have to have the exact representation, which is I know where 6E is going to go for D&D with their virtual tabletop, but it's not going to be like you're saying is it's not going to be as unique or everyone's going to measure, because look at the owlbear. The owlbear has gone through so many different iterations, or the Aarakocra, where they went from four limbed to 6 limbed beings, or the dragons and how they've all changed over time.
But the funny thing about the virtual tabletop that they're talking about for 6E, it's not going to be any different than a miniatures tabletop. You're still going to have people going, well, I haven't bought any goblins yet, but I have a bunch of kobolds. So these kobolds are all goblins. It's still going to happen.
Yeah.
And that tree over there, yes, it looks like a Christmas tree, but imagine it as a scary tree with a monster face and a bunch of hangman's nooses on it. It's going to happen.
No, I'm not saying that it won't. It's just going to be very interesting to see in how that works, is because, like you said, it's a lot easier for me to imagine Space Marines as little cutouts that I put on the board. And we'll probably all have different views of it versus the miniature, which says, oh, that's what a Space Marine looks like. So
I like this approach, Halakar. oh, those sling bullets appear to have gone. They're now in your stomach. Oh dear, that's a shame.
Well, thanks for reminding me, Helicar, because I've got my peanut butter M&Ms here.
I've avoided, which is funny because I am a miniatures guy, so it'd be really easy for me to dive down that rabbit hole. But I've avoided using them in my tabletops, and people come over and play with me like, "Oh, cool! Do you use these in D&D?" No, but you've got a dragon, I know, and you've got orcs, yes, and you've got goblins, yes, and you've got a rush monster, You don't use them in D&D? No.
So we've already covered this before. I mean, what I think the entire panel here is veering towards is that we prefer the theater of the mind because it gives the less limitations, especially since the moment we start having, as we said, exploration, we already know that there's limitations, that there are physical walls that will be constraining us. When it comes to combat or something physical in front of us, actual miniatures, we are keenly aware that many people suddenly turn into like, oh, now I have to move X amount of squares, so I can only move X amount of inches on the board, and I can only do this and I can only do that, which leaves out for the fun things like the bard screaming he is going to be running over, using the table as a jumping point to then get up and then double kick an orc in its chest to knock it over and into the well of the yawning portal, or something like that. These are going to be the
because you can't do that because it's 40 feet between there. The rules say you can only move that.
So this is why you don't use physical terrain. This is weeks of work, and they're not even done. And this is just 2 buildings.
But they look nice.
They do. But imagine having to come up with that stuff for every time you wanted to change your setting. Yeah. So if you have, I realized I had a good physical representation of my point, because if you're doing that, you are going to use what you have when you create your encounters. Because I don't care how fun it is for you and how much you love to build, you only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah. I have my battle map with my Crayola washables, and I can make an instant terrain as needed. Right?
Yes.
Yep. I have a giant 8-foot long hex on one side, grid square on the other.
Yep.
The
old you got the Mega Mat or the Mondo Mat. Was the Mondo Mat the big one?
I got it for free. Some guy in my neighborhood before we moved was giving away a bunch of battle maps. And I'm thinking I'm going to get some tiny little roll-ups, and my wife brings it home. I'm like, no, she drove me there in the middle of the night because I was out on their front porch. They were dropping. I was wanting to buy nothing. And I come back to the car. I'm absolutely giddy. I'm like, do you know what this is?
Do you have a table?
It's a huge carpet-sized thing. It's like, what?
Well, and I'm going to ask you, General Nut, it's not that I don't like maps. I like the ones they have for Conan, but it uses zones. So I'm not doing exact distances. And I like the zone idea more than I don't want it to, how do I want to put this? I don't want my role-playing game to become a miniature war game.
No.
And so that's part of the reason I like zones, and I don't like everything to be exact. And what you see is what you get. Hey, you know what? If you use your salt shaker or you want to use a die as your character, that's fine. We're good. There's your monster. Small one.
I love drawing maps. I mean, that's one of the ones that's being done for the OSE game, and I've spent a lot of time on that. But it's for my use.
Quick screenshot that so we have it.
Don't do that. But I will be running the game, Theatre of the Mind. So that's for my view when I'm playing, because I like to have nice maps for my purpose. The players.
Mind you, I have recently bought Fancy Map Maker and other supplements just simply because I want to get into actually getting the big art books, so as you can start sketching that out.
Is that the stuff by Jared Blando?
Yes, that is exactly it.
Awesome.
How do you know? Jeez.
How did I know? He did some concept art for my miniatures range before he went and got all famous.
Oh.
I'm going to mention something, while you're talking about maps. Let's go look at the old U2 map, which was what once the players were given, versus the DM was given.
Yeah.
And where one would look hand sketched, the other one looked like, oh, okay, use good paper and everything else.
Yep.
The other thing is, we're talking about maps and exploration. If you look at some of the old maps, some of them didn't even have distances. They were kind of like how you have a subway line that says, oh, if you follow this road, you'll get to this.
And they're also woefully inaccurate.
Well, a lot of them are, but I'm actually surprised in how on the ones that were done in the 1500s, how accurate they were, considering what we have. But that's what I'm saying is a lot of them were just line maps. They didn't care about the distances. Oh, you follow this road, and you get to Rome. That's the next city.
And the scaling on them is often way off too. So important features are usually drawn way bigger than
Oh, who was it? I know. So, when I went to visit the Vatican City, one of the art pieces that they had was that there was an artist who wanted to draw all of Italy, but he wanted one measurement to measure all of Italy, and he went, all the way up from Milan and Naples, all the way down, all the way down to Sicily, and he was like one square centimeter had to be like hundreds of kilometers, and he had to get it in. It was massive paintings. They were, it was like 7-8 feet long, equally as high, and there would be like 4 or 5 of them, and that was just to capture the scale of Italy.
I do have to say, one project I've seen recently that I really like that reminds me of is for a while there was a bunch of the crafting YouTubers were doing like 3D campaign maps where they were doing the topography and everything for their game world. I'm like, that's really cool. They had done resin pours for the rivers, and that's kind of cool. I mean, they're doing these for campaigns that have been running for a while, almost as sort of like a reward for the gaming group. I was like, look, this is where we've been traveling, because I would never put that much work into something that we've only been playing for a short while, because then next week the player's like, I'm tired of this, and or I'll get bored. I'm like, I hate this world. I don't want to run it anymore.
Well,
that has happened too.
Well, I think that happened.
We've all painted ourselves into corners, I'm sure. Like, this sounded really great 6 sessions ago.
Well, that's why part of me likes to just grab other people's settings, and I'll modify them as I care, since I don't have to put all that effort into it. And I did like the we talked about the Greyhawk maps with the hexes,
the Darlene map,
and then they go over to the Forgotten Realms, which had 2 different styles. They had the one big map that was smaller size, and then as you got each of their little books, they got bigger and bigger. You had a bigger area for it, and but there was no hexes on them.
Yeah, the gel with the hexes on them.
The transparencies, those were good.
And
I actually keep my transparency and use it for my own hand-drawn maps. So Ravenloft had that too. The Ravenloft box set.
My first set game is set in Forgotten Realms, and I have the gray box set. And every time I bring out that gel, everybody's like, "Oh wow, I haven't seen one of those in a while." It's like, you saw it last time we played. Yeah, I know. I meant before.
Yeah, it's a cool tool. For the longest time, I didn't bother. Well, actually, still, if I'm hand drawing maps, I don't tend to do them on a hex map, and I just take a piece of white paper and draw them kind of more like the old Tolkien maps. But I mentally set them to a scale that works with the transparency, because I know I can just lay it over.
Right.
Well, and if you're going to talk about VTTs for Foundry, and I'll mention Forgotten Realms or Symbaroum, you have the map initially, and then you have another map which has the hexes on it. They can just go, and that makes it nice.
I do remember the one time I mistakenly used the wrong measurement and created by that map, by that layover. I'm like, I put the cities like 250 miles apart. It's like,
well, there's an opportunity to add things in between.
In between, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but 250 miles in terms of a medieval setting is like, that's between whole countries.
That's another world. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to mention something. They talk about cities. Well, how big were your cities? Because what was it? London was only 10,000 people in the 1500s or so.
Yeah.
I mean, which to us is like a small town nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you've also got like cities like Rome, where it was just at one point I think they reached like almost like a
Yeah, and,
million.
you know,
It's just-
population centers in the Americas were just like 40,000 people. They don't even have metal tools yet. You know?
Yeah.
Look at, I mean, the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, wasn't that massive by their standards of the day?
Well, even on the North American continent, you have the mound builders,
Well, Mississippi had a bunch.
the Mississippians.
Well, you know, what was it? I can never remember. Was it DeSoto? The one that was always looking for the Fountain of Youth and then
Wasn't
died.
that all of them?
No. Because someone wanted El Dorado.
I know.
Yeah, I know. But he went up and he talked about how the Mississippi had these huge cities, and by the time the people actually started exploring again, all those people were dead because of disease. You know.
Was it a book I have called what's it? Big Chief Elizabeth. It's about the early British exploration of America, and they're talking about when they first sailed into the Hudson, the Hudson Bay, that area.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about how the air was so thick with wood smoke that it rivaled London.
Yeah,
With its level of pollution because there was so many people living there. And then the next time they came back, they're like, it's all gone.
Which brings us to the part I love about exploration is you walk into the abandoned city. What happened here?
Yep.
You know, that's, it's one thing when you say, oh, this is for players. Oh, if you go to this continent, there's full of people and wonderful things, like what happened down the Mississippi. Oh, well, all this come back and like everyone's gone. What's there? Oh,
Or the layering of people. It's just like, okay, you go to this village and there's a small, shivering poor group of peasants living amongst the crumbled ruins of some vast, civilization.
But I think one reason why the exploration tier, I think, feels compelling to me is I like to run a somewhat simulationist world, very similar to you, and set everything tending around sort of like 14th, 15th century Europe. But as we mentioned, explorers in that time, they were looking for new continents, new routes, discovering new worlds. And I think that is a big tick for me for exploration in gaming, finding new places, mapping out new places, discovering new secrets, discovering new civilizations and cultures and peoples and what have you. And
I learned something today. Like for speaking about talking about new cultures and stuff, is you don't always have to explain them in games. I think there's this feeling like if you set something out there, then you're forced to have a reason for it. But I was watching a little documentary today talking about one of the northeastern groups that developed copper weapons and tools, and then just started preferring stone. They're like, they made it to the metal age, and they're just like, stone's easier.
there's more of it around.
Well, they actually in that area they had surface accessible copper, where they call it natural copper or whatever it is, native copper, where you can just like pick it up off the ground and dig it out of the rocks. You don't have to do deep mining, but the amount of work that goes into copper, you're like, but I could just use the rocks I'm pulling the copper out of instead of having
well,
you don't have to explain it because, players are always, what happened to these people? Well, by today's level of science and archaeology, we barely know anything half the time. What do you think you're going to know back in the? Well, of course, they have legend, lore, spells, and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
But you don't have to have the answer, and a lot of times that's the fun of it. If there's a giant obelisk in the middle of nowhere and it's made out of a weird stone, your players will wonder, but you don't have to have an answer ready.
I want to quickly jump in and just give everyone a round of applause because General Dunn has just highlighted that major win that we've had for tonight. We've gone on this long without me needing to crack any whips.
It's because even if we go off topic, we can just say we're exploring.
Yes, I've really got nothing against you now.
Well, I mean, but you know, you look at these things and you go, okay, you know, Indiana Jones, you know, the exploration aspect is. I think part of the problem is, and you know, we're looking at D&D. D&D is really about items and levels in many cases. And while you can go and explore stuff, some other games, Numenera specifically, the goal is to you'll find cool stuff, but you also want to go explore and find the history that predated this. And I think that sometimes what's missing is understanding the world that occurred before, or understanding that world so you can move forward. And you know, D&D is aimed at more combat. Some of the other games are aimed at knowledge, trying to upgrade yourself over time with more knowledge. Right? And that's sometimes I think what comes into it is how that works out. And let's be honest, Lord of the Rings is great. You get to see this stuff and you see, oh, well, this was from the Silmarillion. Oh, this was from this book. Oh, this was from, you know, 50 years before. You know, what monsters lurk beneath there? Why did they abandon this? What could have occurred before? You know, you know, not that I really care doing Lord of the Rings, but, you know, when they're on Weathertop to me was just like, oh, it's an old ruin. Yeah, but there's a whole story behind that, you know, that's there that people want to understand.
Well, that'll enrich any game, D&D or otherwise. And, you know, in terms of, I mean, my obviously perspective is D&D, so, you know, I do like to infuse stuff like that, but at the same time, the players are driving the narrative. So if they want to explore, and sometimes they do, they will ask, "Oh, what's the significance of this place?" In my Team Good 1E campaign, there's I put in a module from Second Ed called Shattered Circle. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's actually a pretty good one. It's pretty good. It played out really well, but it starts with a Stonehenge style, you know, circle, and there's just so much you can do with that. You know, it's 1,000 years old. There's an unknown portal that recently opened up leading to with passages to an ancient city below that's 1,000 years old, and it gives its history, but you can also build on it. It's Sulawese, so Sulawese is from the Greyhawk storyline. So, and you know, I set my campaign in the Forgotten Realms, so people are the players are like, hey, wait, this is Sulawese. They're far from home, right? So then that just adds questions, begs answers. While they're playing through the adventure, while they're getting their loot and killing their monsters. So all of it can happen. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, one thing to help with that too is to reuse themes too. Like in my campaign world, they keep running into this inky, oily looking green stone that's made into things. You know, obelisks, statues, an idol, you know, and just this recurring theme of things that they find points to some greater mystery. Whether they ever find it is up to them, and, you know, I don't have it all figured out. You know, it's usually related with kind of Lovecraftian things, you know, so.
Something dark with tentacles.
Well, I'm going to bring something up, which is what to do with a lot of the video games, where they put little clues of what's gone on. You know, one of them I enjoyed reading was the, you know, like when you go through Alien, you open the Alien Isolation, and you start finding little files in there, and it tells you the story. Now, the characters can ignore it. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of a completionist. I've got to find them all. You know?
Every so often, I'll throw my players a bone by, you know, when they're in an inn or other public space, like a market or a carnival or whatever, they'll hear tidbits of a story being told somewhere. You know, that I intentionally have tie into something that they've maybe run into. It's like, and there was the inky black stone. What? He's talking about inky black stones. You know?
5,000 years ago on the conjunction of blah, blah, blah. You're like, wait a minute, doesn't that conjunction happen in about 2.5 years? You know,
what's fun is when you start having unrelated dungeon elements, like this civilization, you know, they're going through like the last civilization, some dungeon, and like, and on the wall you see an obelisk, much like that one you ran into. Like, these people knew about the obelisks too, and they're gone. What does this mean?
those little Easter eggs, they're just kind of cool. It's a certain point.
But also, if you want to get people to go into exploration, that's how do you do it. You kind of bait them into it by making it interesting.
Sure.
You can do all the countryside descriptions you want, but give them one stupid Maltese falcon with a squid head, and they're on.
Well, I think that's what was so cool about Call of Cthulhu. You're exploring and you start finding the little obelisk, and you're like, well, what does this lead to? Oh, wait a minute. This leads to this place over in Egypt. So you're like,
one of the most fun rabbit holes I sent my players down in Call of Cthulhu was a series of children's books that were actually a minor mythos tome.
So I have an idea for a Call of Cthulhu adventure that is based on nursery rhymes. So it might have a similar sort of outcome, but that's nothing to do with exploration. Sorry, Saxious.
Achoo, we all fall down. Sorry, you mentioned nursery rhymes that were, or children's songs that have really dark meanings.
That sort of thing, yes. Yeah. But anyhow, next thing I want to come to is sort of exploration is the issue that all class-based games have, whereby as characters in level, and we've already mentioned this in 5th edition, where they get these sort of abilities very some exploration, wilderness becomes trivialized. Because they gain the spells that provide them food, and they gain spells that help them fly and move great distances and see where they're going. And we lose that impact of the exploration tier in that sense as the characters move on, gain levels, and find stuff and gain new abilities. Is there anything that you guys do to counteract that at all?
Again, this is why I like skill-based systems, because they don't quite lose that aspect. And I like more of a low fantasy than high fantasy. Part of it, I think, is that when you go that higher fantasy, is now you're exploring plains. You're exploring more exotic locations. You can now go into water. You can now go into the city of brass. All the other places that you could go into before that you couldn't go to at low level because you'd be instantly dead. And I think that's where the old Unearthed Arcana really helped in bringing that out of, how things would operate in the manual of the planes and things like that. And I wish that, I'm not saying there aren't some of those elements, but it doesn't seem like it focuses on it like it used to back in the day with, again, we had more books for that, but that's one of the reasons I really wish that 5e had put out a second Dungeon Master's Guide to address those weird corner cases to really bring out the fantastic in the world.
As I get, I mean, the chance to explore the hells and the abyss, that becomes the exploration side of it. Yes. But it's a very different sort of exploration, and it becomes, for me as a DM who relies on something tangible I can grasp and I can imagine, it becomes difficult for me to portray those sort of worlds beyond fire and brimstone and whatever and all that sort of stuff.
Well, isn't it like Gygax forced, or one of them, or was it Arneson? One of them said, okay, once you hit like about 10th level, start over again.
Well, I always try to remember some stuff that I remember reading back in the day where there's always stuff in the game world that breaks the rules. The rules that the players have to play by and the general rules for monsters and magic are not locked in for the campaign setting. So when you get those higher levels and stuff, you can still enjoy that by having the mysteries defy those expectations. Enchantments can go beyond what you can undo with a simple spell and require a ritual or an item. Whatever you're going after may be able to hide whatever it is, or is perhaps too strange to understand through conventional wisdom. So you can still do that, and you can still have those things without having to necessarily go to hell or the weird planes. Like, we're in the Feywild where nothing makes sense.
It's okay for some of those. I mean, if you really get in there, but if you can go for Exalted and stuff, I still love lost things, but yeah, if you can do it, it's all you're really doing it going at higher levels is you're just making more places accessible that the players have only heard about in legend or lore, and you can make those off limits to low level characters because they don't have the spells. So now you're just giving them new locations to go to. So now they're like, oh, that's so cool. I mean, perfect example of cloud giants and going up to their castles up in the clouds. Players are never getting up there unless they get fly. I mean, that's or Pegasi or something.
I guess it's one reason why I tend to lean towards low and mid-level gaming is I do struggle with describing the fantasy when it becomes very otherworld, very, very fantastical. Yeah. And I guess that's another reason why I do like Call of Cthulhu, because I find it much easier to relate to those sort of environments because they are 1890s, 1920s, and those streets still exist. You can still see architecture from that era. You can still it feels more real. I know there's a lot of people who do like the high fantasy and the big sparkly towers and cities in the clouds and all that sort of thing. But I personally find it quite difficult to describe it in a coherent way.
But I like low fantasy exactly for the reasons we're talking about. Exploration means something. Going to new places means something, and it isn't what I want to say, because people talk about this. Is as you go up in higher levels, you're not really fighting anything that's harder, or you know what I mean? It's that they keep making the challenges about the same, but the combats get longer, so that and less interest. You can do all this stuff, but the combats get longer and longer, and you're missing a lot of the fast-paced, and also that gritty aspect of I could die, I need to run away. You're not thinking that as much. Yeah. Oh, okay, I've got another 100 hit points. I'm all right.
That takes us back to game mechanics affecting the various tiers of the game, and certainly as D&D has gone on, especially with 3rd and 4th edition around there, combat did take over in terms of just time at the table, because combat, especially 4th edition, the combat was meant to be the centerpiece of the session, and you were meant to have a big barnstorming combat most sessions, and it with everything having bags of hit points and all these options and tactical movement and everything being based on the grid. It took away from the other tiers, and I think in 5th edition, certainly 5th edition combat takes longer than AD&D and basic D&D combat, which means if you have 3 or 4 meaty combats in a session, they're going to take up 60-70% of the session time.
Well, I think the other part is we're talking about exploration, but some of the old modules, there's lots of just empty rooms that are kind of puzzles or how to take stuff out of them, and it's kind of just lavish in the exploration. Okay, fine. Wandering monsters would help also to push the players forward. You don't want to stay here too long. That's kind of what that does, and that's why you want to get back to the city by the end. Okay. It's like, okay, we don't want to be out here too long because we keep meeting wandering monsters, and it's slowly knocking us down. Okay, well, you get back to the city, you recharge, and go back out again. So yes, that's the way. But I think that's part of it. Also, is whenever we're talking about exploration, how do you keep the players moving in the game, so they just don't get bogged down into rest, sleep. Now, Forbidden Lands, I heard one adventure, not that I've played it, but I heard one adventure, they killed 4 demons. That was not the part that nearly killed them. What nearly killed them is coming back, and the guy was foraging for mushrooms, rolled badly, got a critical failure. The critical failure spiraled up to the point that they got hypothermia, and the group was trying to get back, but they couldn't get enough sleep, and it just spiraled way. He's like, "Oh my god, I think I'm gonna."
All right, I got to bounce out, guys, for the rest of the stream.
See you later.
All right.
All right,
Cheers.
catch you later, Eli.
And that's actually kind of cool. I mean, hearing that is like, it's not the demons that killed you; it was the fact that it was a cold night and you didn't get enough sleep, and now you're starving. And
But that's not heroic.
Well, again, it depends on the type of game you want to play. Heroic is great at times. I want my characters to be heroic, but I don't necessarily want to play heroic games all the time. I want my heroic moments is the better phrase. Like,
I'm in agreement. I'm just aping the common complaint I get from players. I see it at the Toronto D&D group, public group.
okay. Well,
I mean, heroes aren't being heroes every minute of every day, are they?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, and I think you've got to, being heroic is fun.
Yeah,
but is it fun when you're doing it all the time, every session?
No, it becomes mundane.
Of course it does. Of course,
we need flavor, but we've already agreed on that. We need flavor. We need variation of it. It's the same when it comes to the exploration. There needs to be different things for it, but at the very same time, there needs to be a purpose for why the group goes exploring. That's just to quickly chime in.
Oh, no, I agree. Well, the other part that they have is, when you're going out there, it's actually kind of cool do you want to build the raft to go across this? Now I'm going down here, Wesley Powell, anyway, or Jerome Powell, anyway, the one-armed guy who went down the Grand Canyon. The only people that died on that expedition, even though everyone thought he was nuts, were the two people who climbed out of the canyon and got killed by Indians. He was kind of nuts about that. But, there's times that I think that there's that dichotomy, and not that you have to, I think sometimes players also want to play every moment of their entire character's life.
Yeah.
And there's not this, whether it's training, there's not this big group of downtime. Like, again, we're talking about exploration, but exploration can be, I fast forward every 2 weeks and you get an encounter every couple of weeks. Like if you're on the ship. I don't have to roll all the time for that, but I can break up where players feel that there is a time lag in there.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's perfectly fine to say yes. The first 2 weeks of the voyage pass by quite comfortably. Uneventfully. The weather is good, the seas are calm, and but after about 2 weeks, the rations are beginning to run a little bit, become a little bit bland, and the grog has run out, and there's still no sign of the lost continent on the horizon.
Well, there's that. The other aspect is all of a sudden you put up and like, oh, look, there's red in the sky. The sailors start talking about there's going to be a bad storm. You're like,
yes,
you're building up that anticipation. And then the other part is you start getting into it and you can start saying, the world is relatively safe from point X to Y, but from Y to Z, this is where it becomes very dangerous. Yeah. And you just start ramping it up. And so then it really does feel like
you have areas that are patrolled and areas that are not patrolled, and you can fast forward through the patrolled areas. Yes, you can have a few encounters along the way. You can meet groups of pilgrims or merchants that are quite happy to talk to you because you're in safe patrolled lands. But get beyond those borders, and then certainly yes, exploration will slow down because it'll become more perilous, and time will slow down in the game.
Well, all of a sudden you're in the storm, and then you start seeing these tentacles coming over the side of the ship. You're like, oh crap,
Yeah. Or the sea is perfectly calm, and the ship suddenly shudders. It's suddenly something. It's hit something under the water. You can feel it, and you can feel this scraping underneath. And was that a bit of splintering of wood?
Oh yeah. Well, even the doldrums. There's times we can say, okay, you're stuck, like what I think happened in Columbus for the longest time. You're there. But the other part is, we're talking about exploration, and there are random encounters. Will of the Wisps bring out great things if players are just traveling through certain areas. Like, oh, what's there? Do they hear music out the distance? It can really set up a lot of, don't leave the path kind of feeling. in there. And it's like, well, what happens when we leave the path? Well, that's when you get captured by spiders and pray that your hobbit can rescue you.
Exactly. Yes. But what happens when the path leaves you?
Oh yeah. Where are we supposed to find this? And that's the other part that comes into it. And then I know that you guys were talking about getting lost before. Oh, that can be, especially if you're underground, you have a limited amount of torches. That can get truly terrifying if no one's been actually mapping out. It's like, good luck.
I will admit to finding it very difficult to keeping a sense of feeling lost in certainly a wilderness exploration. It's difficult. It's difficult as a DM to keep that going. I don't know if you've...
You keep it. You scale back on, like, depending on the environment, the actual physical environment. I find that by scaling back information, because if we are working under the assumption of they don't have anyone that is going to be a ranger, they don't have ranger adjacent characters, or if they do have them, they are failing their checks or their rolls. At which point, the information that they're now getting is you are going by trees. You think you're heading north. The information you're getting is going down in actual usefulness for you as a group to make a decision. That will frustrate the players, and equally so, that should be frustrating the characters because they're going like, have we seen this tree before? I don't know. Going up to it with a dagger, like carving it in, and then off we go. And then you go off and you go off and you go off and you just roll randomly, and then you might go like, oh, you've actually walked in circles. Like, okay, well, we're not going to go back here. Let's find that rock that was described before. Right, we found the rock. Did we go left or did we go right last time? And then suddenly they're having to like bicker over like minor things because now they're trying to find their own markers. And
oops, that tree you carved the X into, that was a dryad's home.
I have rolled up some random crap in my Saturday campaign, and I had bugbears walk into a treed area where they decided to sit down, rest, and eat nuts in front of the trees, which the trees are just like, you absolute savages. they didn't need to be told twice before they picked up rocks, and the players got front row seats, just seeing trees just turn around going, you little, and just bam.
Well, like you said, is you carve that X, and the tree, and it's like, hey, what are you doing?
The thing is, the way my mind works is I wouldn't dive into things like that, but I would start conjuring up images from the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, that's
just good.
Well, the other part is, depending on where you are in the world, you can't see the sun. So how can you tell which direction you're going? When it's overcast all the time.
Well, even if you can, I mean, you can't just walk in a straight line in the wilderness. You will turn, you will curve. I get arguments from players all the time. Well, I'll just go straight. Well, yeah, good luck. How are you measuring that straight line?
There is also another good point that Elle is bringing out. Of
I was going to say, I was going to actually,
Yes.
I was going to applaud Elle for making a nice constructive comment rather than bitching about Scooby Doo.
No, just to work on that, because I've had that very same discussion with what's it called, stars, because then it becomes the whole question of like, okay, so you as in the group are primarily, active during the day. You now have to shift towards being almost nocturnal just to get an idea of like, are we going in the right direction? And then you've got to make sure that you are on the right direction. And if you're in trees, forest, someone's going to be climbing up in the middle of the night when it's cold. Damp is going to be setting in, and it's just like these things start adding up. All of a sudden, like, yes, you have a sense of direction. Yes, you can do astrology with the stars. You are also now putting on some other penalties, and these are the things. Like this is just going back to my other point of you got to know your environment. You got to know the situations you're going to be in. Traveling during night in the desert is so much more favorable. I mean, yeah, you're going to be cold as all hell, but during the day, you don't want to be out when it's noon. You want to
the worst nightmare for a mariner or someone who's able to navigate by the stars, quite simply, clouds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was saying. Is there are places that whether it was Germany or stuff like that during Sundays, especially fog, where you can hear sounds from a distance. You're not sure what's out there. You can only look so far. And then the question starts. You're talking about this because very similar to The Hobbit. Oh, look, it's raining. There's lightning. We're gonna stop in this cave. What's in that? We don't know what's in that cave. And then what do you do? And when you go underground, no one sees anything. There's a lot of aspects towards that. Is do you hear the noise? Do you investigate? That's part of what I love about the whole thing with exploration is you suddenly go in and you're completely lost. And you're going, okay, there's no more hope. I guess the effectively what is it the Lost City? It's a perfect example of that. You just happen to find a door, and you're like, I'm going to die of exhaustion. If I stay out here, I might as well go in the door.
You start that by you need to find food and water.
Yeah, and again, if you don't have tracking characters, and if the group aren't prepared for that, that's a major problem. If they are prepared in the sense of resources, then yeah, sure, it is now just a question of like how long till they actually get a roll right. But at the very same time, how long are they going to go to find an opportunity to justify that they even get to roll for that new thing? Because getting lost, once you are lost, it is hard, really hard to not be lost. Like, we are talking, this is one of the reasons for why, if you're out in the wilderness, many people go like, that hill over there, that's where we're going. Because from there, we can just have an overview. It's why you climb trees. You just want to get advantage, but you need a point of reference to go, we are now heading in this direction. If you've got a, compass, you just need to see roughly, okay, the thing we were looking for was in southeast. Every morning we are orientating ourselves that way. We might be veering a little bit off, but we're heading in that direction. Once we get closer, we will pick up other signs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like you said, there's that, and again, fog. All of a sudden, your point of reference is gone. Do you wait for the fog to go away? I mean, there's a lot of adventure in this aspect that has nothing. That's very dangerous. The other part is, even if you are well supplied, exploration is inherently dangerous because your supplies can get lost or things like that. And it's like, okay, great. I want to go hunt. I'm like, well, you're in the desert. You don't know where to hunt. You're in the plains, but it's the wrong time of year. Everything's up north.
Adding on to that, because you pointed out a very good thing, your supplies can get lost. I mean, your mule can get spooked. Your henchman can literally run like blind panic. Blind panic when that sets in. You're not going to be. There's no time, and I have cut players out from talking, gone like, no, you're in blind panic right now. Everyone's running right now. You are telling me a number between 1 and 12, and I'll just go down the line, and I know which direction that is. But that's just like primal instinct sets in, and everyone's running, and then they start scattering out, and then it's like, there you go. That's how it's going to be done. Yes, you're taking, at least in my situation, I'm taking away the player's agency because. Number 1 from 12, you have no idea what's north, what's south, but neither should your character. Not in that moment. I really, a great example where my players actually demonstrated good sign of like just genuine fear and just lack of actual coordination was when we had a session where one of the players showed up having drunk a bit, and they ended up encountering 5 stone giants, and the player who was a bit intoxicated decided that he's going to cast magic missiles on the stone giants while the entire group was hiding behind an illusion. And it was 5 players, 8 hirelings, 9 dogs, there's so many characters just hiding and afraid of this, and then this happens. The hill giants basically starts going, we're just going to throw stones at you because we're not going to take that. Wall of fog goes up again. The hill giants can't see, but the stone giants can't see, but the numbers, the math is just against them. So the players and the characters at this stage are just scampering to get out of the canyon or out of the little valley or whatever it is, where you've got 2 hills on either side and you're in the center of it. They're just anywhere to get out of it. Like one of the guys literally began climbing up, other one just ran back, and it was just all over the direction. Casualties were insane. Like player character wise, and I rolled everything in the open. Player characters survived. NPC wise, that was a slaughter. They lost so much. They ended up having to spend 2 days scavenging and just living off whatever they could, just to find a mule that had 1 pack of resources that they could then use to go searching longer to get the other mule. And at that point, they just went, we're spending too much time just fetching the animals. We need to get back to civilization.
Well, even the fording and stuff, this is the other part with exploration. Just because you can explore an area, you can't always bring all the stuff back. That was the other part of the adventure of, oh, great, we found, 60,000 gold. I'm like, okay,
yeah, good. How are you going to carry it? Yeah.
Yes.
You're one horse. You're like, well, and then
That's all. That's all part of the preparation for the exploration, though, isn't it?
Well, or at least, hey, we're going to go back and then come back with all the equipment after we clear the dungeon. You get that aspect. But the other part is like they're talking about fording a river. I know we all talked about this, but okay, you lose a horse down. Now what do you do? Especially if it's heavily laden, all the stuff is at the bottom of the river. Well, who knows where it went down? They either have to chase that, like Zacchaeus is talking about, or there's a lot. This is why I like the grittier aspect. I don't mean necessarily gritty, but this is why I like the low fantasy aspect, because players have to think through these things, and it does bring that part up of going, oh, okay. The other part is, I'm going to mention Star Frontiers in this case. Mm-hmm. The very beginning adventure, you crash land on the world. You're trying to go somewhere. At the end, you're starving, and it's kind of preset at the end. Before you're going to die, you meet the you meet this alien race. Are you going to attack them while you have no water? Are you going to start healing them down and say, you know what, we've got nothing to lose at this point? And it encourages that role play aspect more than just the combat aspect.
Absolutely.
You don't have to like the hobgoblins. The hobgoblins are like, what are you doing here? Again, the Lord of the Rings with the goblins. We were lost. Could you just help us get out of here?
Yeah.
And then you go, well, wait a minute, you have Orcrist. Crap. If you hadn't had Orcrist, maybe you might have made it out alive.
I mean, I'm just going to flag up. I mean, Grumpy Old Slan, if I was lost in a shopping centre, my sanity would be heavily tested because I can't stand the places. I can't stand them. But it does remind. I'm going off tangent, off topic here because we've been so good for just over 2 hours. It does remind me of the classic Christmas episode of the sitcom Father Ted. Has anyone ever seen that?
No.
The 3 priests at the center of the sitcom get lost in the lingerie department of a department store, and it's magnificent. It's 3 priests lost in the women's lingerie section of a department store, and it's so funny, so funny.
You know that they weren't lost; they were just sinning.
They were. They were completely lost. They were completely out of their element. They had no idea what. And yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the great part of why I love exploration so much is just to see what's out there, and even the great works and everything else is, when you talk about the fantastical elements, you can throw those in, and players just like, wow, the lost city of Shangri-La. You've been traveling through the Himalayas, and suddenly you see this lavish or this lush jungle with beautiful fruits and all these other things. Or one of my favorites was, having read the John Carter of Mars, or listening to it again, where they went through and they said, oh, it's the Valley of Issus. And then you realize that it's full of monsters that all want to eat you. Like, okay, where do we go now? And then you start finding out they're the white Martians that are doing this. And then, that cascades into the black Martians, then the yellow Martians. But there's that part of, oh, okay, you go here to end your life, you don't realize it's a giant trap. So I think there's that cool aspect, especially when no one ever comes back. It's like, oh, you go this way, and if you make it, then you'll achieve heavenly bliss. Right in a giant plant man's stomach. So That's what I like.
I don't know anything about John Carter of Mars, so I'm afraid. I've never read any of it or listened to it or even read about it. So
it was one of those pulp, I know that they made a movie, which was okay, but it was one of those pulp things of, somewhere between science fantasy and, heroic swordsmanship. And it was, but it still gives those ideas of, all great adventurers explore somewhere where no one else has been, or where no one else, or not where no one else has been, where no one else has returned from. That's probably the most important part of exploration is, everyone's been there. No one's just ever come back.
How many D&D adventures have got that though? The people of the lost caverns of blah 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 blah, where many adventurers have gone in, but no one has returned to tell the tale.
That's a trope, right?
Well, and what was
completely?
The old D&D with the dungeons, as you started, monsters were placed by levels, and I don't mean levels like in. That's the problem is they use levels too often for everything, but the different levels of the dungeon determined on how hard the monsters were. So when you had like the 10th level of the dungeon, that's not what level your character was. That's how deep you'd gone down.
The dungeon level.
What did you find there?
What's one of the reasons why I'm so looking forward to running a bit of OSE, because I will be adhering to that.
Okay. Well, and that's be very different. It doesn't have to make logical sense. It's D&D. You're in a fantastical world. Of course they have this. The other part is, we're talking about hex crawls, but part of it also comes down to domain play. You have to go explore and move out as you expand your empire. So, I'm going to have to clear this out. Okay, well, now you've discovered the bugbear den. Oh, and now you've discovered this. And now you've discovered this. And now the griffin's eating my peasants. They won't give me money. Now I have to go kill off the griffin.
Well, I mean, in AD&D, you don't have to clear out a 50-mile area before you can claim your domain, and that in itself is right there. There's the exploration of hex crawl to pacify your region, your new home.
I do wish my players had grasped that part of the game when we got to those sort of levels, but
anyway, I am going to have to call it an evening here and skedaddle, but it has been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. Lots of fun.
Thank you, Sexius. Are we playing tomorrow night or not?
I'm on.
You're on.
Yeah.
Excellent. Get the event up and see if we can get Nutty and Gingerbeard in as well.
It's up. Gingerbeard's already signed on.
Good.
Well, I'm going to, just go back for Forbidden Lands a little bit. Well, anyways.
See you around, Sexius.
But in this one, they actually have caves in the ice where you have to explore. And some of them get you back to the surface, and some of them take you further down, and some of them will probably lead you to death. But isn't that why as kids we used to buy all the supplements? Like they would talk about this region, like, oh, what's in that region? Oh, look, the new supplement came out. So you come out and you go read it, and like, oh, cool, this is so cool.
Going back to MERP, that's how they arranged all the supplements. I don't know if you remember the videos. I don't know if you saw the videos I did on placing the MERP supplements on the world map. And yes, some areas of the map were more heavily detailed than others, but in general, there was almost always at least one region guide for each region, and they were very useful in that sense in having the information in one place. Part of the problem with the Arnor book is it is just so big and so unwieldy at times, because Arnor is a massive region, and they combine about 6 or 7 different supplement books into that one big book, 400 odd pages of it.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking of the old, Greyhawk.
You got the gazetteers, the basic gazetteers, yeah.
Yeah, the basic gazetteers are great. Everyone talks about Mistar, which I haven't. Part of me wants to pay for it, but I want it when it gets cheaper, which they never make it more than like 20% or something like that. Like, why can't you just give me one that's like, pay 20, like $10 and I can get all of it? But they did that, and then I think the Forgotten Realms as they went through, and then they would show more detailed maps as you go through it. Or Glorantha, which shows every little city down there, 1,000 people. Also, you start getting this, and it still gives you enough room to modify it how you want, but those cultured.
I liked Greyhawk, and I had the old sort of the sort of coppery sort of coloured box Greyhawk set. That's what I haven't got that set anymore, but I've got the older. I bought a copy of the older version from eBay. But it's the gaps. It's a big, beautiful map, and it's the gaps in it that almost make it. Well, it makes it much more usable.
Well, even the Forgotten Realms has that, but when we talk about exploration, sometimes you're exploring places that are well populated. Like I'm going to think of like Marco Polo. Okay, you're going to China. Now you're exploring a whole different region, a whole different culture, different monsters, everything else. And it's not that you can't communicate. It's just such a long distance that most players never make that trip.
I mean, with Forgotten Realms, as long as you moved away from the Sword Coast, you could. You had gaps, but if you're on the Sword Coast, there's no gaps at all. It was just. I'll
be honest. I hated even going near that region. Everyone uses Waterdeep. I'm like, that's not the cool part. It's always the edge of the map that's cool. The well-defined middle. It's like, oh, so what? I want to go. Not to knock England, but Welsh, Irish, Scottish. That always sounds. The more untamed regions were the places that always sounded exciting.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, well, there are bits of England. You've got the Lake District. You've got Cornwall. I wouldn't say the Cornish were very well tamed.
All I know about the Cornish is the hens.
Tiny chickens.
Yes, that's Cornish game hens. So, but the same thing happened in the United States with the Manifest Destiny. People just kept going west, and you did find really cool stuff. Whether it's true or not, just the fact of the stories of giants and mound building and.
Well, imagine being the first Westerner to see the Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah. Oh, what was the other part? Is the Yellowstone with the springs. I mean, how would you explain that if you've never seen anything like it? With all the vivid colors and geysers shooting up and everything else, it's and that could be a hellscape if you really wanted to turn it into that for D&D.
Well, the petrified forest.
Yes.
It's a forest made of stone. Did you ever read the 1001st Tale of Scheherazade? It's an Edgar Allan Poe story.
Maybe. I don't remember it.
So the conceit was Scheherazade continues her stories, after marrying the king, and what Poe does is talks about adventurers in the United States, in the Americas, and describes all these wonders in the Americas. And then, of course, the king beheads her for telling tall tales.
Oh, okay.
Because they're too unbelievable. He describes the petrified forest, describes the Grand Canyon, describes steamships. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually, it was an interesting little tale, but a little satire. Yes, but yeah, to your point, like there's such amazing wonders that we still have in our world that can certainly feed a game.
Well, if you get away from the city, as much as we talk about the city, it's I know with Rome talk about exploration, but we're talking about the underworld, Herculaneum, where they used to dig down and they would find treasures down there, and they would bring them up. So they knew there was a city down there long before. But they couldn't excavate 80 feet of volcanic tuft. So they would
Have you ever been there?
What's that? I've never been.
If you ever go there, go to Pompeii first. Pompeii's a whole day out, and you'll be like walking around going, wow, it all looks great. And go to Herculaneum second. Because if you see Herculaneum first, Pompeii will have no wow factor beyond its size.
Okay.
Herculaneum is just so brilliantly preserved.
Well, but they said, I guess it was even, like 1,000 years. Well, I guess it was during the Middle Ages. They were drilling down and they were talking about the frescoes and stuff. And they would bring up bits and pieces up to the nobles, which to me just sounds really fantastic for players. Well, what are we going to explore? What are we going to bring up? And, the old D&D used to have it. If, this mural is worth so much, they can bring it out whole, which brings a whole new idea of how do you bring that out in pieces so you can put it back together and sell it off.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very, very amusing day. I was 16 when I went to Pompeii. Spent the whole day exploring Pompeii.
My father went. I did not. I mean, we hit Rome, and that was about it for Italy. And then I went over and I went. Whitewater rafting up over in was it Slovenia up there, the border between Italy and I believe Slovenia. And that's absolutely gorgeous. And I went during the spring, and again, that's going to the terrain's going to look completely different. The smell of wildflowers. There are lots of we just talked about descriptors. Is like, oh, it's warm here. You can see the ice coming off the blue. The glacial blue river going across, and you hear this, and but especially for character, this is the one thing I wish D&D had done a little bit more of how to make potions and things. Oh, you're going to explore, but guess what? You can only pick this flower during this time of the year. This, and like, oh, okay. And what was it? Was the story of the Edelweiss, where they had to go up during the mountain during certain times of the year to pick it, and of course it goes on like the side of a cliff, and that can be an adventure unto itself. And now you include all the other things out there. So even things that are, quote, familiar, that are not that far, still can bring up those dangers just because, that's populated by stone giants. All right, well, we normally don't meet stone giants because we don't go up there. Yes, but you need this one flower to do this one thing. Oh, no.
The town's mage needs... one flower picked at dawn of this specific species that's grown in the dung of a certain creature in order to brew a single potion of invisibility.
Oh yeah, I mean those are great for that. You're like, oh okay. The other part is exploration allows you to put in new monsters. I know like Mage Musicians talked about this, new monsters, new items, new locations to get all that XP. But part of me goes, I hate saying this. D&D encourages the leveling aspect, and because of that, you tend to focus on what will give you the most levels the quickest. Whereas some of the other games, it's kind of like, well, let me just enjoy the world and move forward on it. And
especially when Wandering Monsters don't tend to have much treasure on them.
Yes.
If you're playing by the rules, obviously a DM can tweak that and have the random ogre encounter where he is carrying a bag with some very nice jewelry in that he's just robbed from a nearby caravan or whatever.
Well, by the book, all ogres do carry a bag with a couple hundred gold, so you get that at least. But
yeah,
I mean, you're right in that the leveling system kind of encourages the idea that we gotta reach for those levels, we gotta strive for those levels, but that can be a mentality that can be sort of massaged out of players too, with just play the game where you are. This is a metric to keep track of your current skill level, but it's not the end goal. And that's something I try to encourage players to think about.
Well, sometimes, everyone talks about, well, my character doesn't advance anymore. Yeah, your character doesn't advance anymore. Now you can actually focus on doing all the other cool stuff.
All the role-playing stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Or, I want to go grab these items so I can make more magic items and stuff. You're like, okay, now you're focusing on that instead of leveling.
I mean, when I play my games, I only award XP at the end of the adventure, not the end of the session, at the end of the adventures. Yeah. So that has actually helped because most of my players don't even think about it. They just play the scenario and they know when they get home, when it's safe or the story is over, that's when they'll be awarded. So that certainly helps.
Well, let's be honest, you can't get more than one level. Once you've already reached that cap for that level, like you're not allowed to advance 1 XP below the next level.
Well, that's true in OSE, but in AD&D, you can get as many. You freeze, but you can still get as many XP as you earn. It just freezes until you get your training.
Does it? I thought that I thought that you weren't allowed to do that, but though everything blurs there for the most part.
Yeah, it does. It does blur. I have to recheck these things periodically because as I get older, everything gets fuzzy.
Well, that's why I like it so much better. It's like, don't get me wrong, the Dungeon Master's Guide is fantastic for what it is, but part of me goes, I don't want to have to remember all the rules, guys. Let's just flow,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've said this before. You need the player buy-in. For the more complex game, you need the players who are willing to play the complex game. If you just want a casual game, then you need something a little more appropriate for the players. As I get older, I embrace that philosophy more and more.
That's why I tended to play a lot of AD&D stuff with a lot of basic rules replaced in because it's simple, faster, more fluid, and it works. It works fine.
Yeah, I like the Forbidden Land stuff and how they do theirs, and I like the fact that which D&D doesn't do as much, but Forbidden Land's cooking can be just as important as your shield skill, or foraging and things like that. It's like, oh, this allows you to make a certain amount of food with this. You're like, oh, okay, we need that food more than we need the ability to fight off, X monster. Because we can run away from the monster, but we can't run away from not having food. So. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Elle on there. We paused at level 3 and bought a town. Well, that's cool too.
I think L prefers the B portion of the BX.
Well, I mean, it was what, which is funny because it went from 4th to 14th, which is a huge leap from 1 to 30.
Huge leap, yeah.
But that's what comes into there. I like the morale rules. Yeah, there's just so much out there, and for exploration, sometimes you want those NPCs to encourage the players to explore. Some players want to stay where they know everything. Okay, that's great for city adventures. We can do all the role playing and deal with it there, and deal with the political intrigue. But the nice thing about exploration is you don't have to worry about the politics for the most part. That all stays behind. It's all right, brain white guys. We're gonna just go out in the wilderness. Don't have to worry about it.
I think so. There is something to be said for it being easier to handle the basics of exploration with a very simple rule set. Break it all down to simple D6 rolls and let the dice guide you. If you've got the basic rule set to work with, just give you an idea of what mechanics you might want to. You can make up the mechanics on the spot and on the fly, and as long as you know roughly how a game is supposed to operate.
I'm going to
go to town, have fun.
I'm going to mention something. When we talk about exploration, you can take real world settings. You can get LiDAR data. You can put it to QGIS. I mean, without getting really complicated for some of these things, but you can create a 3-dimensional map. And you can realize just how, and if you've ever been to these areas, and I'm going to use Hawaii as an example, you have to really take some effort to go to the other side of the island, even though it's only 30 miles. And I think sometimes players forget about that. It's just how much, it's really easy to go against planes. Oh, okay, I can walk that, a day or two. But boy, if you have to go up 7,000 feet and down and go through streams and everything else, you're like, well, you know what? We're going to get on our boat and we're going to go around the island that way. But to go through the center, that's too much effort. That can, especially if it's 7,000 feet up and you're at sea level. You're like, well, yeah, it's only 10 miles and we can see it, but I got to climb that high. I've got to do this. And yeah, we'll do it at a later time.
I mean, the biggest mountain I've ever climbed is Snowdon in Wales, and that's only just over 1,000 meters, 3,500 feet roughly. And it takes all day to get up there and back down again. It's the route we took, 6 miles up. I guess it was a path that's been laid down. We weren't doing any hardcore climbing by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still arduous. And one year we went a shorter route, but much steeper. That was tough in places, and this is a well-trodden path. So imagine what it's like when it's all overgrown. It's wilderness. I don't know if you've climbed any big mountains, but
I've climbed bits and portions in Hawaii. I forgot what it took. The Haleakala. So Haleakala, I've done a little bit of it, and
they're fairly gradual, aren't they? The Hawaiian mountains aren't very steep. They're quite gradual, I believe.
They are, but you still have to go up and down. And even by car, it still takes forever to go winding your way up. And then, of course, when you go down, and it's only 10,000 feet. It'd probably take me all day to climb up if I really tried and didn't have to worry about dodging traffic. But I did go
to the top of the Alps by cable car, but that's the highest I've ever been. But I didn't climb those.
I'll tell you, what is it? What is the one over by Seattle? Anyway, we went up. Well, it's famous because you can see it from a distance. We drove up there, And I talked to a lady, and she said, "Oh yeah, I've gone on several trips just to go around the mountain. It took her about 3 different times of hiking, and we're talking about a couple of weeks each. And on the top, there's a glacier, so you've got that aspect. And what is a Kilimanjaro? Kilimanjaro is an effort unto itself to get.
Well, it's like a 6-day trip, Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, and if players do not have the ability to breathe and things, now so you could put monsters up there. Kilimanjaro is like no one has reached the top, and then you can put I'm gonna put a monastery up there. There's a lot of fun things you can do with that.
Els asked, did OD&D have a wilderness book? I don't know.
Let me check. Hold on a sec.
I don't
You're talking.
know.
Oh, maybe it did. I don't have it. But
The first book I had that had any wilderness stuff in whatsoever was the expert set.
Box set at my table here. Okay, what do we got here? I read through these years ago, but never thrown around. Okay, so we have the Men in Magic, the Monsters and Treasure, Underworld and Wilderness. Yeah, there we are. Book 3, Underworld and Wilderness.
Oh, right. Okay. So, there was wilderness stuff in OD&D.
Yeah,
I didn't know
and that's
that.
Book 3 is a core book. It was from the very first set.
I've never owned OD&D.
Yeah, I bought the reprint that came out 10 years ago, and then when I found they were discontinuing them, I bought a few extras. So there may be giveaways on the channels as I hit multi-thousands.
Multi-thousands. No.
Subscribe to Majors Musings because
this
I
is a
want
big
a copy of that.
gift. I'm waiting until down the road.
No. I think that's cool. It's just so what are you up to now, Sean?
Hold on, let me click over. Still 798.
Okay.
Just coming up on that 800 mark. Yeah, so the wilderness book has basically what you'd expect. It's got the wilderness monsters, the charts, things like that. Everything, a lot of things that made it over into basic and OSE. Flyers, mountains.
I don't remember. Does 5e even have those charts like they used to in the first edition and things for the different?
Probably.
Yeah,
not.
it does. Yeah.
Xanathar had a random encounter check.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it does have some charts, but by no. Again, the Dungeon Master's Guide has plenty of charts and things, but no one ever reads it.
Yeah, it's a great book that no one ever reads. It's I know everyone, whether people like 5e or not. I'm like, it's a great book, but because no one reads it, they're like, oh, I'll do this. Like, it's in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. If you just look, really?
Yeah. It's a surprisingly good book, the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. It's just.
I wish that they'd brought it out a second one before going to the 6e version. I thought that just to give more players that old school feel if they wanted one.
Yeah.
But they don't, like, okay, you're just leaving money on the table there.
So yeah, I mean, the exploration tier has always been a third of the game, as far as I know. I mean, obviously, my first experience with the game was 1983, and the first 2 things I owned were I had the Mensa basic set, but the BX, the Cook and Moldvay expert set. So the 2 different versions, but it didn't make any difference to me.
They're 95% compatible anyway. There's a couple of little differences, but the big one that threw me off, because OSE did this, is there's no area of effect for sleep, just the range.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and it actually came up because most sleep editions, they'll have the area of effect. You blanket a 30 by 30 area, which is nice and simple. But so I started ruling it that, okay, it's line of sight wherever you're facing when you cast, rather than just implement. But it still affects all creatures that you can see. So then the wizards are like, oh crap, right? That means I got to be out in front with my team behind me casting.
Well, isn't there a limitation on the hit dice that it can affect?
Yeah, the 2d8 hit dice still applies, but and you work from the bottom up. But if you're first level, you're gonna. And there's no elves don't have the resistance to sleep in OSE and BX like they do in AD&D.
Something I learned when one of my prospective players for the weekend was making a character is that halflings don't have that hiding ability that they had in Beckme.
They do. Yeah, they do.
they?
90% in underbrush and 1 to 2 on a d6 in dungeon settings.
Is that only if they're a single? If you're using races class though?
Yes.
Right. Oh, I don't know offhand if they took that away when they separated race and class, but the races class, those are the abilities there.
I feel like the races class because that forces players, if they're going to play a non-human, like this is what you're stuck in. Well, I don't like that. Yeah, that's the reason that you don't play one of those if you don't like that limitation.
See, I wasn't going to be using the races class, so I've not really read that bit. I've been focusing on the individual races at the back of the advanced book.
Right, at the advanced book. But you're not allowing multi-class, right?
I'm not allowing multi-classing. Okay. No. And there's Halfling page has nothing about halfling hiding.
Did you notice that in multi-class it doesn't say how many multi-classes you can take?
Yeah, there's information missing. I just wanted to talk to Rage Prime there. Yes, in AD&D there's an area of effect. Most games there's an area of effect. We're talking about Old School Essentials and BX where they don't list an area of effect for sleep, which creates some adjudication fun for DMs.
Well, no, I just meant that it was kind of cool because if you really wanted to, it's like, oh, I'm going to be blah 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 level. Like, well, good luck. You can pick your 4 classes or whatever it is, but you're never going to advance. While your friends are flying up levels, you're like, I'm second level and they're 5th or 6th. So, but I actually kind of like that. It's like, okay, you want whatever's allowed, you can be that multi-class, but for the races, I still like the, if you're not going to allow multi-class, just play the class is your race.
Mm-hmm.
There is a pleasant simplicity to it, but for the purpose of our game, I think I wanted to have a bit of the advanced feel to it.
Sure.
And that's there in the book. That's there in OSE as an official option. So.
I am not publicly judging you, but behind the scenes, I am seething.
Well, no. I guess my question is, can you still play your characters, your race's class, or
no?
So if I want to play a halfling, do I have to play a fighter or a thief, or can I just play a halfling class?
No, you have to be a fighter or a thief or a druid. I'll allow you to be a druid.
See, I'd rather just play the halfling class. If I'm playing OSE, it's like.
I tell you what, I mean, if somebody really wanted to do that, I wouldn't deny them it because effectively, like the racer's class elf is a fighter magic user.
Fighter magic user, but you're not allowing multi-class, so there is no fighter magic user, so it has to be one or the other.
Yeah, that's why I was mentioning. So that's what I was trying to say is if you could, because a lot of times I like those little other skills that are in there for him, and I said, well, if I'm gonna play this, then why not just play a human? But I understand with like that's why I was asking between the two. Like, oh, okay, well, we'll go for this one. And, I like the dwarf having some of the skills without having everything, and it's like, okay, I'll be limited to 8th level as a halfling. I always find it funny because I know Shadow and Son will talk about he hated halflings. I said, did you see the saving throws on halflings? They're like kick ass.
Oh yeah, halflings rule. Well,
I do find it funny though. Before the game starts, even knowing about how rough OSE can be, people look at those level limits and think they're going to mean anything.
You're going to get there, yeah.
I'm like, look, you get to that level, then you retire and you start a new character. It's not any different, and that's why I was just laughing at that.
Don't assume that people be getting to that level, though. Don't be making assumptions.
But make an ass out of you an umption.
Well, I know that some of them have the really. I know they didn't include it, but man, looking at some of the abilities that you get above, with the thief. Oh, now you can climb walls on vertical, on completely upside down and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, those look really cool.
Grip with your toes. Grip with your toes.
That's only if you're in Australia. You have to do that all the time. You have those really strong toes.
Of course. Australians live their life, don't they? Like, hanging upside down like bats.
Yes, exactly. But that's why I was mentioning the two. Is it's like, well, if I could play one, could I just play the the basic, halfling? If I wanted to play a halfling,
if you really want to play a halfling, yes, I'll let you do that.
Okay, all right, just checking.
That's a good way of doing it.
Yeah. Like, you get pick one or the other. Oh, okay. Well, I'll do this. So yeah, it's. But I think they are great. But I think that's one thing with OSE is it gives you just enough information to actually just start and play without really being bogged down and everything.
Yeah.
That's the problem with
absolutely.
1E. Sean, you keep on bringing all these rules. I'm like, well, is that what it really says, or does it not say? And all rules are optional. And what amazes me is the Dungeon Master's Guide at the very end for the acknowledgement, the part that no one ever reads at the very, very end. It basically says, "Don't allow rules law."
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it goes back to the player buy-in, and
Yes.
I love AD&D. I love the nuance, and I love all the little like the way it makes the game play, and it's interesting. But like my Saturday group, they're into it. The buy-in is there. They track their encumbrance. They track the weapon type versus AC. They do all of it. Whereas my Sunday game, they're more casual. I've got to constantly bring it up and say, okay, so maybe I'm going to move you guys to OSE. But and so I love both. I love both experiences. But it's again, it all dependent on the group. I don't want to get I wouldn't want a bunch of people who just want to show up and play for fun, and say, okay, well, here are all the AD&D rules. You got to know all this stuff. Rick, who plays Nom Gare, plays the Cleric of Mask in the Night Below game. I've been gaming with him since we were in high school, and but he shows up to the table having done no homework, and people are getting annoyed because he'll spend 20 minutes trying to review his spells and figure out if he's got components, and it's like, Rick, why didn't you do this in advance? You knew we were playing. So
I will say this much: nowadays with the PDFs, you can just print off your spells and here's your little spell book, and you just put off the
he's got the books, he's got the stuff, he just doesn't do it.
No, what I mean is that you don't go through the player's handbook, because you just print off your own little spells, and that's it. You don't get to see what the other spells do. It's like, this is it. That's all you get. This is your spell book. If you don't, if you lose a page, you don't have that spell anymore. Oh,
Oh, I see. Yeah, they're going that far. But I mean, I had Rick come into the OSE game, and it was perfect. He showed up, he played, he enjoyed the simplicity too. But he likes the complex game. But I got to remind him, if you're going to play the complex game, there's a little more work that you have to put in. So how much are you willing to put in?
And I think that the complex game works best when you have a bunch of former dungeon masters that have all played it and are kind of rules lawyers at heart, because then they'll double check each other, and it's like, okay, I'm not worried about your rules. You police yourselves. So yeah.
So what's this L? It's like, in terms of the accounting, L, it depends on the group. I mean, in terms of AD&D, I have people, well, I do it in the OSE as well, but it's easier for the encumbrance. I make them track their encumbrance. All the various modifiers, because I use the weapon type versus armor class. I'm going to do a video on how to simplify it so you can do it, because a lot of people complain it takes extra steps and it's hard to do the math. The math is really easy. You just have to understand when it applies and when it doesn't. But you need to know the information.
I think
what I'll be doing with the encumbrance is quite simply, if you are carrying a significant amount of treasure, which I will define as one large sack full, which is 600 coins, then you move down an encumbrance. Yeah. You otherwise you move out unless you take the piss. If you take the piss and you're carrying 5 battle axes or whatever, then I'll make you work it all out. But if you're being sensible and you're carrying a weapon, a spare weapon, a backpack, a few days' food, maybe a coil of rope, your armor, you'll move at your standard rate until you're carrying 600 coins of treasure, a large sack full. I'm going to keep it as simple as that.
Well, OSE allows you to do all that. That's what's great about it. It says, here you go. Oh, you got this armor. This is what your encumbrance will be. I mean, I think the other part is, as we've gotten older, we're probably policing our players a lot less. Yeah. I know when I was young, I had to I had to make sure they weren't cheating or doing stuff, and so
Because they would cheat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But my players now, they don't want to cheat. They want to play the game, because they even tracking the encumbrance and balancing the treasure and the food and everything is part of the challenge and part of the fun.
And the reason I picked to do it that way is because I want to play a casual Discord drop-in game where people can just drop in and keep it quite casual, just keep it fun, keep it relaxed on a Saturday afternoon. Nothing too heavy. Might be Saturday evening, depending on what people want to do. That's my time, obviously. I know my evening's your afternoon, but
yeah.
Right.
But, just like people are talking about this, the more they get into it. So I'm not disagreeing that the more that people get into it, it's just hard to find all those players that want to get in that deep. If you can find
I would love to play in a game where people get that deep, so I can start thinking about those sort of things. Because I enjoy thinking about those sort of things when I'm a player, but when I'm a DM, I'm the other way. I tend to throw things out for pace purposes.
I'm going to bring up something I know that's a bit off topic, but one of the great things for dungeon masters is to have the rules checker as a player, and say, okay, here, you go check that rule for me. We'll move on. And then you come back and tell me, and let them delve into all the books. And like, okay, my job is, from the old World of Darkness, I'm the storyteller, and we'll go by the rules, but you're the one that double checks all the rules to make sure that everyone's playing fairly. It's like, oh, okay, here you go. And especially those players that seem bored a lot of times, those are the ones you really want to, here, you go look through the book. I'm going to keep you busy that way.
I try to give everybody their moment. I'll engage with everybody, and in terms of rules, I'll do my best to adhere, unless I've specifically changed it or have a house rule. I'll adhere to what's in the official core books, but my head isn't a computer. I don't remember everything, and and so if I have to look up a rule, it's like, all right, here's the deal. If I can't find it within 30 seconds to a minute, I put the book down, I make a ruling, we go on. Because you do want to keep that fair enough.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is that's why I like having, and usually, oddly enough, that would end up to being me as the player. I'll double check the rules for stuff. Hey, by the way, this is how the rule works. Oh, okay. But as a DM, it's just like, let me go find the one rules lawyer. All right, you are now the arbiter of the rules. If I say, hey, look, can you look up what encumbrance is for this? Do it, and then I can keep all the other stuff there. It's like, okay, you got back to me. All right, now I can make a judgment. All right, and
do you know how many times when I was running that last Call of Cthulhu scenario? Do you know how many times I opened the rule book while I was running you guys through that?
Probably the same amount we did.
Zero. Not even once.
The sad thing is I have the books, and when I was young, I would go flip through them. I barely have even opened up the books. I'll look through some of the spells. I'll look through some of the character options, and like, okay, I understand the idea of wealth and things. All right, I'm done. I don't really care about the rules anymore. You just tell me and what's going on. And the older I get as a player, I'm just going to tell you my actions. I don't care if you even roll for me. I'll just do the here. You go roll for me. I don't want to have to screw with it.
Well, one of the reasons I'll adhere to the rules, probably the more pedantically than a lot of people like, is that part of the game is a tactical game. And you do need the framework. You need a constant framework that players can expect the rule, the game will be played by. There can be exceptions, of course, but you still want that basis of trust. So players know that the plan they came up with, which is based around the math of a certain rule set, will at least have a fair chance of success. Barring
that is easier.
A specific exception.
That's easier to achieve with a system that has such a simple, solid core framework as OSE, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. But AD&D's got a lot of interesting mechanics that really make the game dynamic, but you've got to know how to implement them. I had a guy running a game for us, and he had introduced, we were first level characters, he introduced a rock flying and hunting in the area. It's like way above our pay grade. So I came up with this plan to kill the rock. It's like, well, we get enough money, we get archers and lancers and pikemen, and we'll go and cavalry. And I actually had this laid out and put out my battle mat, and I was testing my theory, and 9 times out of 10 it worked. We were able to kill the rock because of the rules, because flying creatures, if they take 50% of the hit points, they have to land. And of course, the DM in question, no, he was one of the ones who will throw out all the rules just to make it cool. And it's like, so we would never win. As far as he's concerned, the rock was his baby. It was the big monster of the area, and it wasn't going to die until he let it die for story purposes. Yeah, exactly. And that's where you kind of lose the trust, because if the players come up, if I was running that scenario and the players came up with a good plan to lure it out and whittle it down to whittle its hit points down to make it land, and then send in the cavalry, then by all means let them win.
If they've got the level of engagement there to act, and are willing to spend that time to formulate that plan and invest in all these mercenaries to help them and equip them in exactly the right way, it shows they're being engaged. Reward them, give them the opportunity.
Well, here's the other part. I don't care what level you are, you're probably going to lose like 50 to 100 of your mercenaries anyway. I mean, it's an epic fight regardless of how you look at it.
Of course.
It's not, well, we took it down to half. Well, that sounds great, but what's Rocket's armor class 2 or something like that?
3, I think, 3 or 4. But
I mean, that's still hard for them to hit. Plus, the rock does enough damage. And to be fair, this is where I start saying, look, this is going to do it. I would start allowing the rock wing buffets. So now your character's like, now you got to attack from behind for most or more, at least the flanks. Otherwise, you can get wing buffeted with the, in Geese do this all the time.
Oh, I'd have the rock picking up rocks.
Oh,
stone rocks.
but again, that would be a good. It's you countering it as opposed to you just arbitrarily saying no, it's not going to work because this rock is key to my plans as DM.
Yeah. No. See, I would much rather you lose 100. I mean, to be fair, if you lose 30 or 40 henchmen, that's an epic fight. I mean, that's Sinbad level style of, which is where the rock comes from. Is that Sinbad style kind of cool? It's like, look, that's an entire ship's worth of mercenaries that are dead. But to me, that's fine. I agree with you. No, my point is that when you trust the players enough, they'll police themselves. And you say, okay, just let me know what the rules are. And, like John's talking about, is when I used to have a range, I always had 4 weapons: a dagger, a sword, a spear, and a longbow. Those were my weapons that I had. And they make sense. They're not unusual. People would obviously carry them. In certain cases, like, okay, my dwarf carries a battle axe and hand axes. That's what he has, and I throw the hand axes and I carry the battle. And we all know what makes sense at a certain point. It's sometimes you don't have to track everything, but I agree with you. Is I want players to really become imaginative, and it's like, look, if you can get 60 people and they all save in their morale checks as they get wiped out by the rock, more power to you.
I use the term reward them. I wouldn't necessarily reward them by allowing them to win. You reward them by allowing them the opportunity to put their plan into action, because that makes them feel as though they're engaged, they're doing something,
and let the dice play out.
Exactly.
You don't have to adjust it, fudge it. I want to answer Mar Hockman here. He asks why the rock story was critical. I don't know. He had this big thing where the rock was going to play into whatever plans he had. He did eventually have a group of Nay-1 ghouls that were constant threats to us, tame the rocks, and we're flying them. But I don't know what his ultimate long game was.
Well, I think sometimes it's just like the dragon. You can't kill the dragon. Then don't allow the dragon. I hate saying this. The dragon can fly a couple of 1,000 feet up in the air. You don't have to hit him with a bow. I mean, you can get him out of range and like, well, I'm going to fire. Okay, you don't reach. He's too far away. And people forget just how big. Like we see a small Cessna airplane. Most of the time they're flying like 1,500 feet away. Well, all right. What is that?
I just need to remind Slan, I won't be streaming Friday, so I won't see you Friday. Sorry, but enjoy your game of Pandemic. It's a good game.
We've all been playing Pandemic for 3 years now. What the hell?
Well, here's the difference. Well, no, I've tried playing Pandemic. I hear season 0 is really good, and so is season 1. But I've never played it, oddly enough. Let me rephrase it. I've played it on the computer side without actual other players. But no, I guess my whole point really was this: is like you're saying, is if you get all the players to buy in, I as a DM don't have to remember everything. I'm doing all the things that they don't know behind the scenes, and then when we actually get up into there, it's like, oh, okay, what's the best weapon against this type of armor? Which there were certain weapons that historically. You don't use a sword against plate mail. You use a bashing weapon. I do this, I do that, and I think that's great for having.
And against leather armor, your thrusting and your cutting weapons should be better. And yeah,
and that's what I mean by that is, if the players are doing it, the players will police themselves. They're like, oh no, that's not what goes on here. Okay, fine. You guys police yourselves and tell me what the role actually is. and I'm not. Like you're saying, Sean, I'm not the one that has to babysit them to make sure they're not cheating. At this point, they know that they're cheating themselves if they're not playing by the rules. And that includes spells and things like that. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, well, I'm going to cast a spell and do this. And the person changes, it's like, that spell can't do that. Oh, okay. Well, I'll think of something different. All right. That's fine.
I think that all comes with gaming maturity, which is something we mentioned on the stream quite a few times before. And as gamers get more mature, they become better at policing themselves. And the DMs, I like it as a DM, knowing that I can trust my players to be policing themselves. If you were all a group of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds playing on Discord, I'd have you rolling every single roll absolutely in that using that dice roller, and there would be nothing ever done without me viewing. But because everyone who's playing is going to be 30, 40, 50 odd, maybe some 60-year-olds.
I still want to roll out front. I want everybody, because it's a shared experience. And if you're
yeah.
making that key attack at the right moment and you get that natural 20, everybody cheers. Everybody's part of that experience.
You mean my double zero, my double zero, my 0-2.
Yes.
It sounds funny. Is I like rolling these dice. It's well, okay, that's a green. I had a red one, and I'll tell you what's going on. That was one time. Well, you know what? I realized I flipped these the wrong way, and that's why I said, you know what? Gotta fix that for my. That's why I took off my 30 luck right there. So I realized I messed up there. So you only got 11 luck. I'm like, yeah, because I screwed up on one of my rolls, and I had to. I had to cheat. I had to go fix it by using all that luck to make sure that I would have passed it anyway.
But you rolled that 0-2 in Discord,
yes,
in front of everybody, at the most important moment, and it won that final encounter. But you also rolled that 00, that 100, that critical failure, that's what kept your character alive.
Well, and it was one of these things that if I thought that it was important, like the more critical the roll, that's when I would want everyone to see it. Like you're saying, that shared experience. It's like, look, it really doesn't matter too much if you roll an observation check and you're not in an ambush or anything like, oh, did you find the key under the bed or something? Okay, you're rolling the observation check. Maybe you see something, maybe you don't. Maybe when it's not that critical. But man, the final. Whenever we did the final fights, I made sure that I rolled on Discord. Yeah. So like, oh, look, you got the critical hit on this one when he attacked the statue, and then you did this, and then the same thing with it's a grumpy old slam. Anyway, and you got this one also for when he stabbed with his bayonet, even though he had a 20%, and he still made that.
Yes,
those are the memorable moments that you get. That's when everyone cheers. No one cares if you roll. I mean, you can cheat on insignificant stuff for the most part, and it's a little bit. But on the critical stuff, you want that stuff in the open because critical failures are fun and critical successes are fun, and those are, So I'm not saying
it all made for a really good game. I think everyone really. I got the impression everyone enjoyed it. It was dramatic, and this is the point where my stream gets dramatic because this is the point where I have to end it. It's pumpkin time. Yes. So we have reached pumpkin hour here in the good old Blighty, which means it's time for me to go to bed. And so it's as I've said, I'm not streaming this Friday. I'm going to be donating my hard-earned cash over the bar and via bad gambling to the junior section of my daughter's football club. So I will likely have a bit of a hangover on Saturday, but we are playing OSE on Saturday. Well, we're having a session 0. an
Okay.
extended session 0. Whether we get to an actual game, I'm hoping we do. But initially, I want the day to be like a drop-in, give people a bit of background, make sure they're okay with the system, create a few characters, just that sort of stuff. And
I'll definitely be sitting in. It's my 1E game day. Then people start arriving around noon. But
right.
But 9 8, you're starting at 9 a.m. my time, so this gives me a couple hours.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the fact that you do it earlier in the day for myself, so I don't feel like I lose my whole day. Unfortunately, normally I like to join in stuff like that, but I think I'm going to be digging more holes before the.
As I say, though, it is a drop-in game. So
Yeah.
when you've got a Saturday free, pop in. That's the idea. Yes, we've got about 10 people signed up for it, but I don't ever expect 10 people to turn up all at the same. I hope 10 people don't turn up all at the same time. I'm hoping we get 5 or 6 per session, maybe a few more.
And as of trying to reform myself as a power gamer, I always submit my characters in advance. Is this okay? And if I know some, well, I mean, it used to be a jerk. Like, I'll just bring the character without them knowing whatever's like, no, is this okay? Do I need to change things around? Or especially if my characters have high stats, like, I think the stats are too high. Do you want to roll them up, or is this okay?
Well, don't worry, it's lethal regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 3 or 4 people have already made their characters.
Yeah.
I've already made a load of NPCs, and one of the NPCs has got 4 bonuses on the stats.
Oh wow, that's really nice.
And I'm not saying which of the potentially hireable NPCs it is, because there is a pool of NPCs that you can hire, all for varying costs.
Sure.
But whether you need them or not, it depends on how many people turn up for each session and what you want to do, because it's just going to be one of those sort of, say, drop in, drop out, play as much as you want, just a bit of fun type thing.
You're following after Sean there, who's like, and the mysterious, so and so, just the contrived entrance. So
Of course.
that's great.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean that's great.
It might not always make the most sense, but who cares, as long as everyone has fun, and that's what matters. But on that note, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who's dropped. Firstly, Elfbait, who's been and gone, and Saxius, who's been and gone. Check out Elfbait's channel. It's making some progress. It's beginning to get a few more subscribers, and he's streaming quite regularly now, which is good. Haven't been able to be on his streams as much as I would like, mainly because of the changing clocks, the time difference, and the fact that our clocks changed and we were a bit out of sync, but it should be okay from now on. Sean, you're known for your channel and your puppets, and
coming up there. I'm at the 800 mark almost, so closing in on that vaunted 1,000 mark. So I'll be doing a little giveaway when I hit 1,000. Definitely, I'll print up a whole ton of the Order of the Stick minis, and but I'm going to add something else to the mix. I just haven't decided what.
Well, like I said, it's just so classic to do the Stick of the Minis, because that's all we've ever seen from it.
Yeah.
Yes. Of course, Omanal doesn't have a channel. He's just on everybody else's.
Well, that's true. If I did a channel, it'd be probably about farming, and I don't really think anyone cares about that in role playing. So,
well, the thing is, Omanal, that is why you're the NPC that is named after you in the town of Yule is a ranger.
Okay.
So, I just thought you'd be the most suitable one, being ex-military, a man who enjoys the countryside. There you go.
Oh yeah.
And of course, Sean will be Merle, who is the
local crank wizard.
Oh
yeah, exactly. He's got a little cottage with his own little garden, because he's got magical ability to keep the soil fertile around there.
And John is required to do the voice.
Oh.
Hello.
We will interact with Merle all the time just to make John attempt the voice.
Hey, Sean, I think that's what you should do. Is you should come in and make sure that you go over to your character's equivalent, just to see John try to impersonate you.
Oh, you're gonna torment me, aren't you? You're gonna torment me.
It's not a self-insert L. It's a John insert. I didn't have any say in the matter.
Yeah. I have inserted a number of NPCs, and yes, there's an Elfbait, yes, there's a Saxius, yes, there's a DK, and there's a Gingerbeard as well. Even though Gingerbeard hasn't been on any of my chats for a while, because I know he's quite busy. So, and there may well be other NPCs in the game named after other regulars in chat who could pop in from time to time.
Wait a minute. You have to put the grumpy old man as L. You know.
No, then grumpy old Slan will get offended because he's the grumpy old.
No. You can make him as the the lizard man or the bullywug captain over there.
We can do all sorts. Well, we shall have to see. But anyway, for now, I'm going to call it on this stream. Thanks to everyone who's taken part. Thank you, everybody in chat. Sadly, no stream this Friday, but I'll be back next Wednesday for more Midweek Geek. Hope to see you then.
Good night, everyone.